Chapter 24:36. System. Can I raise this fish? Meg asked in his heart. This fish looked good, and it should not be a problem to use it to make sashimi. If you sell this fish, aren't you afraid that the giant dragon clan will come and kill you? The system asked softly. What's there to be afraid of? The princesses of the Frost Dragon Clan and the Golden Dragon Clan are in our hands. They can't do anything, Meg said calmly. Then let me borrow a seed, the system said. Meg chatted with the system while looking at the contestants on the stage. The 7 contestants were all holding top-grade ingredients. The most miserable one was the guy who chose the black jade turtle. The black jade turtle was indeed beautiful. The turtle shell was green and smooth, and the quality was excellent. Under the light, it glowed with a faint green light. It was definitely the best jade. Moreover, this black jade turtle was not small. Its diameter was more than 20 centimeters. If the turtle shell was put in the auction, it would easily fetch an 8-digit price. It would be the most expensive item in the auction. But the other contestant wanted to take away the turtle shell. Under the supervision of 2 professional staff, the contestant carefully separated the turtle shell from the turtle meat. Then, he watched as the other contestant took away the black jade turtle shell, leaving behind a turtle shell that rolled its beady eyes around. Meg guessed that the black jade turtle might have been borrowed by the production team. They had discussed it with the owner. The turtle shell would belong to him, and the turtle meat would belong to the production team. This black jade turtle would be gilded on the show, and it could be sold for a good price in the auction house. And the appearance of a black jade turtle in the Chef King competition could also bring a wave of popularity to the show. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. While the others were in full swing, Meg was watching the show. The audience did not know whether to laugh or cry. By the way, did Hades buy an infield ticket? Is he here to watch the live show? Looking at the countdown, I feel like I'm more anxious than him. Is he only good at slaughtering sheep? How can he be in the mood to watch the show in such an intense competition? The judges didn't say much. They had seen Meg marinating the ingredients earlier. He was obviously waiting for the ingredients to be marinated. However, in order to make themselves look more professional, most players would find something else to do while waiting. Even if it was useless to show off, they wouldn't choose to watch a show in this kind of situation to make themselves look less professional. After looking around, Meg withdrew his gaze and slowly began to mix the sauce for the roasted lamb chops. Meg was an amateur when it came to roasting lamb chops. He didn't get any recipes from the system, nor did he enter the test field for the god of cooking to undergo the hellish training. However, he had tried roasting lamb chops, lamb legs, and even whole lamb during his travels. He was quite knowledgeable about sauces, seasonings, and fire control. The sauces were modified from the roasted lamb skewers. After some slight adjustments, it was more suitable for the taste of the lamb chops. The marinating of the mutton was also very important. The mutton smell of the black sheep was very light, but Meg still did a full set of treatments to remove the mutton smell. The cooking wine was brought from the underground city. After a careful massage with a few spices unique to the underground city, the mutton smell was 100% removed. Meg purposely slowed down the pace of these steps, including the amount of seasonings. He also used a spoon to demonstrate precisely. His idea was very simple. How could he make a recipe widely spread? The steps had to be simple and clear, and the seasonings had to be precise enough. He had analyzed the various dishes that appeared in the Chef King competition. The ingredients had to be precious enough, and the cooking method had to be classy enough. The chefs could show off their skills, but if the audience could learn it, it would count as the show's loss. Hence, the show had been produced for 5 seasons. Every season was very popular, and there was a lot of discussion. However, there wasn't a single dish that really made it out of the circle. Meg was here, and he planned to change this tradition. If it was so difficult to gain fans on the Norland continent, why not try it in the underground city? Even though the system said that this world didn't have the foundation to become a god through incense, Meg still wanted to give it a try. Meg took out the mutton chops from the accelerated marinating oven. He brushed a layer of oil on the surface, and placed it on the wire grill of the oven. The other contestants all had high-end ingredients and high-end smart kitchenware in front of them. Only Meg had a simple charcoal grill and 2 black sheep chops in front of him. The charcoal wasn't burning brightly. It was slowly grilling over a small fire. After a while, the oil started to boil, and the mutton shrunk in a hurry. As the oil shimmered, The aroma of the roasted mutton started to spread slowly. His cooking method is very ancient, and the mutton chops look a little oily. There's no separation between the charcoal and the food. Won't the rising charcoal and soot stain the mutton chops? It's a disaster when those messy seasonings are put together. I can't imagine how terrible the taste will be, David said with a frown. David frowned. As a clean freak gourmet, he had strict requirements when it came to cooking. Yes, this kind of dish can't be served to the guests in Tucker Hotel. Food hygiene and safety are the most important things in the food and beverage industry. Julian nodded in agreement. That's because you haven't seen a whole lamb roasted directly on a pile of freshly burned charcoal. I think Hades's cooking is very good. He has shown us a traditional cooking method. The charcoal and the lamb chops are separated by a layer of steel wire mesh. When the oil drips into the charcoal, a faint flame rises. This is the first time that such smoke and fire has appeared in the Chef King competition. Old Hunter didn't hide his admiration for Meg. He praised, since chefs from all over the world have gathered in this competition, we should treat each contestant with a tolerant attitude. I agree with Old Hunter. Smoke is a word that only appears in books in recent years. It's not a good thing, Nancy said with a smile. The judges' table was not far from the console, so the contestants could hear the judges' conversation clearly. Some of the contestants looked at Meg with pity. A contestant who was rejected by the judges wouldn't be able to advance to the next round. Meg was quite calm. He was here to overturn the mainstream food and beverage industry. The charcoal roasted mutton chops were only a side dish, so it wasn't worth making a fuss about. The icy cold high-end kitchen utensils were absolutely accurate, but they had lost the smoke and fire of cooking. An overly meticulous diet might be healthier, but to Meg, it had lost its soul. As time passed, the contestants on the stage were nearing the end of their stewing, boiling, roasting, and cooking. Various fragrances seeped out from the wok and floated in the air, competing with each other. This was a setting by the program team. They didn't isolate the smells, but instead, they allowed the smells to drift freely. The judges could smell the smells of the contestants cooking. As for who could cook better, it would depend on their own abilities. Chapter 24:37. Indeed, only simple cooking is needed for high-end ingredients. Meg smelled the aroma in the air and couldn't help but sigh. He flipped his lamb chop over. The aroma in the air was tempting, but to Meg, it was bland. It was the freshness of the main ingredient. For example, Iman's yellow arowana had been steamed, which amplified the freshness of the fish and made it even more tempting. But that was it. Although he agreed with the concept of high-end ingredients and simple cooking methods. But if high-end ingredients were matched with high-end cooking methods, they would definitely surpass the former by a few streets. In the current mainstream cooking concepts in the dungeon, health was the most important, followed by the taste of the ingredients. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with the two, but focusing too much on these 2 points would often lead to the loss of many other flavors. Just like a person who only ate fresh fish soup, he wouldn't be able to taste the sourness of the spicy and sour fish, or the spicy and spicy grilled fish. The 7 contestants on the scene all followed this philosophy. Whether it was stewed black jade turtle or steamed yellow arowana, they couldn't escape this rule. This was also the reason why half of the judges didn't think highly of him at all. It was contrary to their culinary philosophy. The lamb chop was flipped over, and the aroma that had just floated up was suppressed again. Carbon-grilled lamb chop wasn't as fast as using high-end cooking utensils. It was important to roast it slowly over a small fire. Otherwise, it would be overdone if it wasn't cooked properly. Meg wasn't in a hurry. It was only half the time, and he didn't have to fight with them over the useless first dish. It's indeed the black jade turtle. It can release such a tempting aroma even when stewed. I think Iman's yellow arowana is more fragrant. Although it's steamed, the secret sauce makes the aroma even more intense. He's indeed Julian's disciple. The aroma of the yellow arowana is indeed not bad. It faintly suppresses the other aromas. The judges didn't idle around. They began to sniff and evaluate the aroma. All the contestants received comments, and most of them were positive. The strange thing is, I don't smell any mutton at all. Julian looked at Meg with a smile and said, "Could it be that the fire has gone out? It's normal that you can't smell it." The other contestants all chose top-quality ingredients. The smell of the black sheep is definitely completely suppressed. When choosing ingredients, The contestants should consider this aspect, David said. It was a reminder to the other contestants that they needed to be more careful when choosing ingredients in the later rounds of the competition. Nancy looked at Meg. His expression was as calm as ever. He held a brush in his hand and unhurriedly brushed the lamb chop with oil. He didn't seem to be affected by the judges' comments. This concentration and calmness actually made Nancy a little stunned. Sure enough, men who are serious about their work have a special charm. Nancy snapped out of her daze and couldn't help but laugh inwardly. She hadn't expected to be stunned by a player. This had never happened before. Come on, black sheep. Good luck, brother Hades. Could it be that only high-end ingredients can make delicious food? Could it be that these judges eat yellow dragonfish every day? I don't care, I support brother Justice. Seeking a counterattack. Seeking a slap in the face. This is the first time I've seen food that I can afford to eat in the Chef King competition. I hope to have a good result. Compared to the judges' pessimistic prediction of Meg, the comments on the internet had a completely opposite attitude. There were voices of support. Judge, I'm done. Alfonso, the contestant who chose the black jade turtle, said. He was the first to finish the competition. The live broadcast camera cut to Alfonso's stove and zoomed in on the dish. The shell of the black jade tortoise was taken away, and the several pieces of stewed black jade tortoise were reassembled into a whole tortoise. Furthermore, a crystal-clear tortoise shell was carved out of some kind of melon, giving it a different kind of beauty. Meg took some time to look at the big screen. This guy's carving skills were pretty good. The turtle shell was carved very lifelike. Moreover, he made full use of the melon's characteristic that it would become transparent after ripening, making the dish even more beautiful. The cooking method of stewing was very simple, but the carved turtle shell was enough to add a lot of points. This was the so-called operation of the restaurant. Although it was useless, it could definitely quadruple the price. Judge, I'm done too. Then Iman, who was next to Meg, raised his hand to signal the judge. The camera cut to Iman's stove immediately. In the long fish plate, a glittering yellow arowana stood among the clouds, as if it was about to soar into the sky. Several mountain rocks and water plants carved with radishes and melons added a bit of artistic conception to the dish. Meg nodded slightly. This Iman's cooking skills were really good. Whether it was his knife skills, his control of the fire, or his imagination in the plate arrangement, he was much better than the black jade turtle. With the presentation of this dish, he should be able to enter the top 4. Wah! This yellow arowana is so beautiful. I think it will be delicious. My turtle, it's still not as good as a dragon. Chef Iman deserves to be the chief disciple of Tucker Hotel. I give him a thumbs up. As the contestants' dishes began to be presented, the audience also began to become lively. According to the rules of the Chef King competition, the finished dishes would be presented to the judges immediately. The judges would taste and grade them on the spot to ensure that they were in the best state. The ratings of the other contestants would naturally affect the state of the contestants who had not finished their dishes yet. The program team was playing with the heartbeat of the contestants. Alfonso's black jade turtle stew and Iman's yellow arowana were brought to the judges' table. There was a conveyor belt on the judges' table. The two dishes slowly moved in front of the judges, ensuring that each of them could closely observe the details of the dishes, as well as smell the dishes up close. When the two dishes were placed together, the difference in appearance was obvious at a glance. The steaming method had preserved the shape of the yellow arowana very well, and the exquisite plate arrangement had added a lot of points. As for the black jade turtle stew, although it was served in a crystal bowl, there was still a clear gap between the two. The steaming method preserved the shape and exquisite appearance of the yellow arowana. The hidden knife pattern ensured that the taste would enter the dish without destroying the appearance of the fish. Contestant Iman's idea is very ingenious, David praised. The other judges also nodded, expressing their approval of Iman. Contestant Alfonso's idea is also very ingenious. After the black jade turtle shell was taken away, he used the crystal melon carving to replace it. The carving is exquisite, and the effect is quite good, Old Hunter commented on Alfonso's work. After admiring the plate arrangement and the appearance of the dishes, it was time for the main event, tasting. The staff members served the fish and turtle soup to each of the judges for them to taste and evaluate. Chapter 24:38. The fish is tender, light, sweet, and mellow. The Tucker Hotel's exclusive sauce adds layers to the fish's taste. This steamed yellow arowana is amazing. Gourmet David was the first to speak. He was full of praise for Iman's steamed yellow arowana. The fish's texture is excellent. The control of the heat is just right. The choice of sauce and seasoning is also very good. It accentuates the freshness of the yellow arowana and elevates the taste to another level. Another judge praised. I think this turtle soup is the best. It's my first time tasting a 3,000-year-old black jade turtle. This stewing method is not a waste. It's a wise choice to not add too many ingredients. The crystal melon added at the end didn't affect the taste of the soup at all. Instead, it added a hint of fragrance. Old Hunter put down the bowl in his hand and nodded with satisfaction. The judges expressed their opinions and gave their comments on the two dishes. Meg casually brushed oil on the lamb chop and flipped it while eating the melon. From the judges' comments, Iman's steamed yellow arowana was obviously better than Alfonso's stewed turtle. Although the black jade turtle soup was also highly praised, the overly simple cooking method covered up the contestants' cooking skills to a certain extent. After the comments, the judges directly gave their scores to the two dishes. The competition used a 100-point system. Each judge's score was based on a 10-point system. The total score of all the judges was the total score. The scores were quickly calculated. Iman got 90 points and was temporarily in first place. Alfonso got 82 points and was temporarily in second place. 90 points was considered a good score in this season's competition. Coupled with Iman's third-place PK value, he was basically guaranteed to be in the top 4. As for Alfonso, whose PK value was at the bottom, he was basically eliminated. Meg nodded in his mind. Iman's stable performance, coupled with his status as a backdoor entrant, still only got 90 points. It was clear that the judges were very strict. This was a good thing for him. At least it gave him a chance to enter the top 4. As Iman and Alfonso's scores were announced, the atmosphere in the room became tense. The contestants finished their dishes one by one and were brought to the stage by the staff. They were evaluated by the judges and then given their scores. Just as Meg had expected, there was not much difference between the scores of the contestants. Among the 6 contestants, the lowest score was 78 points, while the highest score was 92 points. So far, the highest score was set by a contestant named Angelina. Her rainbow phoenix had won unanimous praise from the judges. It was a delicacy cooked with the best wild pheasant as the main ingredient. Through the decoration of various ingredients, it completed the magical operation of turning a pheasant into a phoenix. Mag had seen Angelina's information before. Among all the contestants, she was the only pure contestant who didn't have a management company backing her. However, she could be considered as a slightly famous food promoter in the micro-promotion industry. Compared to the other contestants, her culinary specialty was to give the food a sense of beauty. She was like an artist who had the ability to turn something rotten into something magical. She could make food that looked ordinary become beautiful and artistic. The contrast between before and after was extremely pleasing to the eye. Therefore, Angelina was also regarded as a strong contender for the championship. The other 7 contestants had finished their matches one after another, and the judges were already half full. At the same time, everyone's eyes and cameras were focused on the last contestant on the stage who was still cooking, Meg. The aroma of various delicacies in the air had yet to dissipate. Coupled with the previous wonderful comments of the judges, even the air seemed to be extraordinarily delicious. The time is almost up. Is he still not done? Contestant Hades won't be the first contestant to exceed the time limit in the championship, right? He's skilled in butchering sheep, but his cooking efficiency needs to be improved. Otherwise, he'll only be a butcher. The fans were anxious, but the fans of the other contestants had turned on their mocking mode. The other contestants also looked at Meg with the mentality of watching a good show. Although the contestants who had been eliminated were sad, they felt much better when they looked at Meg. Those who thought that they had successfully advanced were even more relaxed. The judges present were not in a hurry. Anyway, they couldn't get off work before the time was up. Instead of continuing to praise the contestants after they finished their matches, it was more relaxing and interesting to give advice when the contestants were present. There's a reason why such an ancient cooking method like charcoal roasting has been eliminated. Not many customers can wait for such a long time. Julian smiled. He was in a very good mood at the moment. His precious disciple was going to advance to the semifinals as the second contestant. Except for the ancient tribes that preserve the tradition, this kind of cooking method is rarely seen nowadays. The lack of hygiene is an important reason for its elimination. David nodded and said, "What do you know about charcoal roasting?" "It's the essence of charcoal roasting. I think this young man is patient and steady." "He's a good seedling," Old Hunter said straightforwardly. David's face was a little unhappy. His voice also became a little feminine. "I think he's trying to delay the time. If he exceeds the time limit, he'll be eliminated. It'll save the judges' comments. It'll be more dignified." At that moment, a strong barbecued meat aroma pierced through the messy aroma in the air and rushed toward the judges' table like a sharp arrow. "It smells so good." The judges' eyes lit up at the same time. They stopped arguing and looked at Meg. The barbecued lamb chops aroma was so strong and unique. After it appeared, it suppressed all the other fragrances in the air. It was impossible to ignore. Nancy's beautiful eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. She looked at Meg's calm face and didn't feel proud of himself for attracting the judge's attention. "Is this the smell of barbecued lamb? It's so strong and aggressive. Just by smelling the aroma, it's enough to make people drool." One of the judges praised. "Barbecued lamb chop is one of my favorite dishes, but this is the first time I've seen a barbecued lamb chop. I've never seen such a strong aroma before. It should have a lot to do with the marinating method and seasoning. Maybe it's also related to the barbecuing method." Another judge said, "This aroma is great." As soon as it appeared, it completely suppressed all the other fragrances. "It's even more enticing than the barbecued lamb I've tasted before." Old Hunter was a little excited. He glanced at David and Julian proudly, as if he was the one who barbecued the lamb chop. Julian snorted softly and didn't say anything. David's face was a little unnatural, but he still said, "This barbecued lamb chop's aroma is indeed enticing, but the aroma alone isn't enough. You have to taste it to know how it tastes." Chapter 24:39. It's golden and shiny. It must be very crispy, right? I want to eat it. Although it's grilled on charcoal, the surface of the lamb chop still looks very clean. There's no ash or black smoke at all. Hades, why? The judges' comments made the audience who were not present at the scene gradually excited. The camera zoomed in. On the grill, the golden brown lamb chops were sizzling with oil, and the aroma seemed to overflow from the screen. Compared to the reserved cooking methods of the other contestants, grilling over charcoal was more intuitive and more pleasing to the eye. At this time, the contestants who had finished their matches focused their attention on Meg. Angelina's beautiful eyes revealed a hint of surprise. The aroma of the grilled lamb chops was really special. It was much stronger than the one she had grilled before. It was an intoxicating and mouth-watering aroma. At first, she thought that Meg used charcoal grilling to impress the audience, but now she began to wonder if it was this cooking method that gave the lamb chops a different taste. Based on the aroma alone, she had already determined that Hades was a strong contestant. At least, he wasn't a good-looking vase. Iman, who was closest to Meg's console, felt the most at this moment. The rich aroma of the grilled meat rushed to his face and the sizzling sound drilled into his ears. He even swallowed a few times uncontrollably. As the disciple of the head chef of Tucker Hotel, Iman believed that his culinary skills were the best ever since he joined the show. Although he regarded Angelina as his biggest rival for the championship, he didn't think that her culinary skills were better than his. It was just that the way she presented the dishes was more exquisite and beautiful. But at this moment, he had to admit that if his steamed yellow arowana and Hades's grilled lamb chops were done at the same time, the aroma of the yellow arowana would be completely suppressed. Of course, this was just the aroma. As for the taste, just like David said, he would only know after tasting it. At this time, the most nervous contestant was undoubtedly Denton, who was temporarily in fourth place. Denton originally thought that he was already in the top 4. After all, his agent had told him before the competition that the substitute contestants this time were just here to watch the show, so he didn't have to worry about them. But now, Hades's performance had made them take him seriously. There was a clear disagreement among the judges, which was a good thing. The points difference between the contestants wasn't that big. Hades was behind by 10 points, and this difference was enough to eliminate him. The heat was just right, and the lamb chops were in the best condition. Meg began to plate them. There were no fancy decorations. The 12 lamb chops were stacked on the long plate to form a small mountain of meat. A small handful of chopped green onions was sprinkled on top of it, and the dish was complete.
Referee, I'm done.
Meg raised his hand. There were only 5 minutes left on the 2-hour countdown timer, which was almost used up. This presentation is really casual, David said with a disdainful smile. Don't tell me you want me to use lamb chop to make you look like a peacock spreading its tail? Isn't a mountain of meat also a classic plate presentation? Old Hunter retorted. Today he was going against Dave. David's expression was somewhat displeased, and he was about to retaliate. I think this presentation complements his overall cooking style. It's simple to highlight the theme. Roast lamb chops are roast lamb chops. There's nothing fancy about it. Moreover, the lamb chops themselves are enough to move people's hearts. At this moment, Nancy slowly opened her mouth. David choked on the words that were about to come out of his mouth, but he swallowed them back. Instead, he smiled and said, "Miss Nancy is right. There's a spiritual aura in this plate arrangement. From afar, it looks like a golden mountain. A few green onions decorate it like fresh grass and trees. It's the finishing touch. It's admirable." Old dog. Old Hunter looked at David with disdain. He resisted the urge to ridicule him. Mag couldn't help but take a few more glances at Judge Davy. His reading comprehension skills were indeed superb. There were many ways to present the lamb chops, but Meg was too lazy to do it. So he chose the simplest way, which was to stack the chops on a plate. There was no artistic conception. However, Miss Nancy suddenly stood on his side. It was a pleasant surprise. On the surface, the Chef King competition was a competition to test one's cooking skills. However, in essence it was a popular variety show. It was to choose a chef for the McCarthy family. As the person in charge of the show besides being a judge, Nancy also had a lot of power. She had more power than the director. After David, the other judges also took advantage of the situation and praised Meg's lamb chops. Only Julienne looked cold and didn't say a word. As the head chef of Tucker Hotel, he had his own dignity. What did a little girl know about cooking? The lamb chops were presented to the judges. They were slowly displayed in front of the judges on a conveyor belt. The golden lamb chops had just been taken off the grill. The sizzling sound was still there, and the aroma was irresistible. Nancy's Adam's apple bobbed, and her eyes were filled with anticipation. The few dishes she had tasted earlier could only be considered mediocre and could not be compared to the culinary skills of her family's head chef at all. The so-called exotic delicacies were also much worse than the ones she usually ate, so they were not rare. However, this lamb chops were different. Even her family's best barbecue chef couldn't make the barbecue meat emit such a tempting aroma. At the end of the exhibition, the staff used a plate to give each judge a lamb chops and presented them to the judges. The temperature of the lamb chops had dropped slightly. It was the best time to eat. Nancy elegantly picked up the knife and fork, cut a piece of lamb from the lamb chops, and put it into her mouth. She pursed her lips slightly, chewed gently, and tasted it carefully, maintaining her elegant and charming persona. However, in the next moment, she broke her facade. The crispy skin was wrapped in the tender and juicy lamb. Nancy took a gentle bite. Before she could react or resist, the rich juice and fat exploded in her mouth. The slightly spicy oil melted on the tip of her tongue, and instantly exploded her taste buds. Ah! Nancy's lips opened slightly, and she let out a seductive moan. Yes, even though she had tasted countless delicacies and had grown up with exotic delicacies, Nancy still couldn't resist this aggressive lamb chops. Nancy realized that she had lost control. Her face was slightly red, but her eyes still couldn't leave the lamb chops in front of her. The knife and fork in her hand cut another piece of lamb and put it into her mouth. The long-lost surprise of food made her a little excited. Although her rich life since childhood made her lose interest in most food, it was precisely because of this that she wanted to find different flavors. That was why there was the variety show Chef King. This season's Chef King had disappointed her. He didn't let her find any new flavors. She didn't expect that a substitute contestant would give her a great surprise. Chapter 2440. Miss Nancy's exclamation was so delicious. Miss Nancy's exclamation was enough to secure Hades's victory. Miss Nancy was indifferent the entire time. I didn't expect her to lose her cool at the lamb chop. Look at her intoxicated expression. Is it really that delicious? The bullet screen was flooded with comments about Nancy losing her cool because of the lamb chop. It can't be. Is this newcomer really that good? The director had a strange expression. He looked at Nancy, who was engrossed in eating the lamb chop. He scribbled a few lines on the script and fell into deep thought. The other judges also started to taste the lamb chop. Old Hunter put on a pair of disposable gloves and grabbed the lamb chop that was as thick as a child's arm. He pinched the lamb chop with his fingers. The skin was slightly hard, but the meat was still soft. He took a bite. Under the crispy skin, the fat and tender lamb chop was oozing with oil. The slight spiciness had seeped into the meat, bringing along the fragrance of the fruit-wood charcoal. The savory sauce gave the lamb a rich taste, and the fascia that clung to the bones gave the lamb a layered feeling of chewing. It was oily but not greasy. This lamb chop is amazing. Old Hunter's eyes widened, and his mouth was glistening with oil. He didn't wait to express his thoughts. He took another bite of the lamb chop and chewed carefully. His eyes were slightly closed, and he had an intoxicated expression. Is it really that good? David glanced at Old Hunter, then looked at Nancy, who had only taken a small bite before, but was now gorging herself. He cut a piece of lamb chop with his knife and put it into his mouth, suppressing his disgust at being roasted over a charcoal fire. Oh, once the lamb chop entered his mouth, David's eyes widened. The rich oil of the lamb exploded in his mouth, and the crispy skin was the perfect seasoning. With that bite, he saw the vigorous flocks of sheep running wildly on the grassland. Those were the elves of the grassland. He saw the fiery red charcoal fire and the fragrance of fruit trees quietly blooming in the burning. He saw the scene of his ancestors roasting food over the fire. Everything was like a dream, and it overturned his thoughts. This kind of deliciousness was explosive, making one unable to resist and unable to resist. As one of the top gourmet in the dungeon, he had tasted almost all the delicacies cooked by famous chefs. He had served as a judge for the 2 Chef King competitions. To be honest, most of the contestants had limited strength, and there was a gap between them and a real master chef. For example, Iman's steamed yellow dragonfish was far from Julian's. For the sake of the show's effect, he would say some pretty words. But this lamb chop was like a sudden clap of thunder, occupying a space in his heart. Yes, to him, this was undoubtedly a delicacy worthy of being amazed. It was a dish that could be ranked on the same level as the specialties of top-notch masters. I think I might have been wrong before. I was so wrong. David raised his head with tears in his eyes and took another bite. It's so delicious. The judges were so engrossed in the roast lamb chop that they forgot to comment. This kind of situation had never happened in the Chef King competition. Even if I, David, starve to death today, I will not eat a single bite of the charcoal-grilled lamb chop. It smells so good. A large-scale face-slapping scene. I'm so hungry. Is there a restaurant in Tucker City that serves grilled lamb chops? There might not be one today, but there will definitely be one tomorrow. The audience in front of the screen were about to cry. In the Twin Towers building, a collie was sitting on the sofa swallowing her saliva as she ordered the secretary beside her. Didn't Big Brother Hades grill 12 lamb chops just now? They ate 10, so there are still 2 left. Go and get them for me. Young Miss this. The little Miss Secretary had an awkward look. This is the McCarthy family's show after all, and it is young Miss Nancy who is in charge of it. I'm afraid we can't say hello. If you can't say hello, then go and steal it. The Mocha building isn't the Twin Towers building. A collie said in a natural voice. We have confidence in breaking into the Mocha building, but this is a live broadcast with over 1 billion people watching, so it might not have a good effect. The secretary carefully reminded her. Her forehead was already covered in sweat. She didn't dare imagine how angry the old master would be if this really happened. A collie looked at her and seriously considered it before saying, Forget it, I'll just send a message to Nancy. She should give me some face. That couldn't be better. The secretary said with a flattering look, but she was secretly complaining in her heart. It would be strange if young Miss Nancy gave you face. Seeing that everyone was praising the roast lamb chop, Julian also cut a piece of lamb for himself. The sharp knife cut through the lamb and oil and juice could be seen with the naked eye. The glowing meat increased one's appetite. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, It was without a doubt the best condition for roasted lamb. Hades was using the most primitive charcoal oven, so he didn't have precise temperature control. It was hard to control the temperature, but he had grasped the most suitable heat, which was very hard to come by.
When the lamb was put into his mouth, the crispy skin wrapped around the tender lamb meat and the charcoal fragrance mixed in.
It was very unique and distinct. It was something that no other method of roasting could achieve. Based on the state of the lamb meat, Hades' control of the heat was perfect. Roasting it a bit more would make it too hot and roasting it a bit less would make it too greasy. It was simply perfect. Precise kitchen utensils provided a lot of convenience for chefs, and also greatly reduced the threshold for chefs. For example, the most difficult part of controlling the heat could be solved completely by timing. Even the seasoning spoon came with its own weighing device. When he was learning to cook, his master had specially given him a set of old-fashioned kitchen utensils and removed all the automatic parts. It was so that he could master cooking by himself instead of relying on the fully automatic utensils. Hundreds of years had passed, and he had become the head chef of Tucker Hotel. Except for the occasional guest, he was rarely busy in the kitchen. Nowadays, chefs could rely on precise kitchen utensils to steadily cook his signature dishes. Ordinary guests couldn't tell the difference. Iman was undoubtedly the best among them, and he was the disciple he was most proud of. However, the lamb chops in front of him made him fall into memories.
Those days when he was reprimanded by his strict master. Those days when he sweated profusely in the simple kitchen. Those days when he was overjoyed because of the slight improvement in his cooking skills. He seemed to have forgotten all the things he had once stood by. When he swallowed the lamb, a warm stream slid down his throat and ignited his heart. It had been many years. His cooking skills hadn't improved for many years, right? Did his attitude of being content with the status quo destroy him in the end? This was really bad. Julian put down his knife and fork, put on a pair of gloves, and picked up the lamb chops to gnaw on. Eating meat in big bites was the correct way to eat lamb chops. Chapter 24:41. Old Hunter was the first one to finish his mutton chop. He put down the bone, took off his gloves, and wiped the sweat from his forehead and the grease from his mouth. His expression showed that he still hadn't had his fill. This is the best lamb chop I've ever had in my life. It can even be said that it's the best barbecued meat. Old Hunter looked at Mag with admiration as he said, "Contestant Hades, you're much more powerful than I expected." "Thank you." Meg smiled humbly. David followed closely behind and finished his lamb chop. He looked at Nancy, who was still eating elegantly. She only took a small bite of each of the previous 7 dishes. Obviously, she was very satisfied with this one. "First of all, I would like to apologize to Hades for my carelessness and recklessness. After tasting it, it's clear that he has found a wonderful balance between food safety and deliciousness. He used an ancient cooking method to show us the true essence of food. The most sophisticated cooking tools can't necessarily bring out the most delicious food. The charm of an experienced chef is even more admirable. Just as Old Hunter said, this is the best lamb chop I've ever had. Whether it's the heat or the seasoning, it's amazing. I can foresee that this dish will lead the barbecue trend to a certain extent and bring new ideas to the barbecue industry." David looked at the camera and gave his evaluation. The judges couldn't help but look at David in surprise. Although the lamb chop was delicious, with David's personality, there was no way he would admit his mistake in public and even apologize to the contestant. This kind of thing was really strange. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly, but he still nodded with a smile. It's rare to hear such a high evaluation from David, and he even apologized first. "Let me ask you one more time. Can you eat the same kind of lamb chop in Tucker City? If you can, I'll go now. I feel like Brother Justice has a chance to make a comeback today." According to the rules of the program, if Hades wants to advance, he has to get 96 points from the judges. Only then can he advance to the semi-finals by a small margin. Netizens' comments flooded the screen. Meg had actually done some calculations in his mind. According to the real-time PK value that she had transmitted to him earlier, he indeed needed to obtain at least 96 points from the judges to beat the current 4th place. Although he had gathered a lot of traffic today, it had only been a morning. So far, his online PK value had only been converted to about 3 points. Of course, this was far better than the 0 he had expected. Dan Dunn, who was ranked 4th, had a total score of 88. 5. From the looks of it, the situation wasn't too bad on the surface. Dan Dunn could no longer sit still. He kept looking in the direction of his manager. Although he knew that Meg's online rating was extremely low, he didn't know if the judge's high evaluation of Hades would bring about any changes. The contestants who hadn't paid much attention to Meg couldn't help but pay more attention to Meg. After David finished his comments, Nancy put down her knife and fork. The whole lamb chop was eaten clean by her knife and fork, leaving only a few fascia clinging to the bone. The other judges saw this and were not in a hurry to express their opinions. They looked at Nancy. In the end, Nancy had the final say in this program, including the list of the semi-finals. They had already received it before the competition. However, this contestant's performance was too amazing. Miss Nancy, who had never had a good appetite on the show, actually finished an entire lamb chop. Obviously, something unexpected had happened. David, who had always been the most cunning, didn't hesitate to praise her. This made them even more determined to wait for Nancy to make the final decision before commenting. Nancy elegantly wiped away some grease at the corner of her mouth and looked at Meg. She didn't hide her admiration at all. In fact, the contestants of this year's Chef King competition had disappointed her. None of their dishes had surprised her. She had even decided in advance that even the champion would not be allowed to enter the kitchen of McCarthy Manor. However, she changed her mind today. She was determined to have this man. Nancy had made up her mind to let Hades enter the kitchen of McCarthy Manor just because of this roasted lamb chop. He would be in charge of the barbecue dishes. Although it was impossible to eat roasted lamb chop every day, it was the ultimate delicacy that satisfied the taste buds, whether it was for a small gathering with friends or for occasional cravings. Moreover, it was difficult for other chefs to replicate it, which meant that it was irreplaceable. This is the first dish I finished in this year's Chef King competition. Nancy looked at Meg and smiled. Hades used an ordinary black sheep to cook an amazing and intoxicating dish. Before this, I really didn't think that lamb could be so tender and succulent, so delicious and charming. He used this method to let us see the charm of traditional roasted lamb. He also proved on the stage of the Chef King competition that not only high-grade and precious ingredients can cook delicious food. I admire you very much. The last sentence was said to Meg alone. Thank you. Meg was still indifferent. He smiled and nodded. The judges looked at each other and revealed an expression that said, I understand now. The last contestant who received such praise and appreciation from Miss Nancy was the champion of the second Chef King competition. Now, he should be the chief chef of McCarthy Manor. Therefore, the judges took turns to flatter Meg. They were not stingy with their praise at all. Is this lamb chop really so delicious? Johnny was surprised. The script was all messed up, but Miss Nancy was the one who took the lead to change the script. He didn't dare to be unhappy. He frowned and changed the script while saying to the assistant beside him, Aren't there 2 lamb chop left? Go get it for me to try. Okay. The assistant walked away quickly. This was one of the benefits of the director team. The remaining food tasted by the judges was handled by them in a pollution-free way. Pack the remaining 2 lamb chop for me. I want to take it back. At this moment, Nancy's voice sounded in his ear. Johnny's expression froze slightly, but he quickly nodded. Director. The assistant quickly came with a plate and presented the 2 lamb chop. Johnny looked at the lamb chop and his throat moved. He tried to look away and said, Pack it according to the highest specifications and put it in the incubator. Aren't you going to try it now? The assistant was a little confused. I want to try it, but I'm not allowed to. Johnny felt bitter and said with a straight face, How can you not do your job during working hours? Take it away. Chapter 2442. Nancy's appreciation made Meg calm down a little. He even began to think about the possibility of joining the McCarthy family through Nancy, even if he didn't win the championship. Winning the championship wasn't his goal. After all, his goal was to join the McCarthy family and complete the follow-up mission. Taking Nancy's path was obviously the safest choice. Of course, if he could become the champion of the Chef King competition, he would be considered as the Earth's best food in the underground city. The judges had finished their comments. Only Julian, who had just put down the barren lamb ribs, was left. The camera naturally cut to him. Iman looked at his master with concern. His master had always been strict. Even though he had learned cooking from his master since he was a child, he had only heard a few praises. Dan Dunn's face was a little pale at the moment. He seemed to see the semi-final place in his hands flying away. This lamb ribs does have a unique flavor. Whether it's the aroma of the fruit charcoal in the roast lamb, or the slightly charred exterior wrapped in the fat and tender interior, they all show the chef's design and thought for this dish. The cooking method seems simple, but it requires the chef to have a very high control of the fire. Although this is the basic skill of a chef, most chefs' ability in this area has been wiped out by too many delicate kitchenware. "I think this roast lamb ribs is the best dish today," Julian said frankly. All of the judges looked at Julian in surprise. The nickname Iron-Faced Julian wasn't given to him for nothing. Julian didn't hold back when he ridiculed his own disciple, but he actually gave Hades, who he didn't think highly of in the beginning, such a high evaluation. "I agree with that," Old Hunter nodded. Old Hunter nodded. Nowadays, many chefs have forgotten what cooking is all about. Most of them have become tools controlled by recipes and kitchen utensils. Hearing that, the contestants on the stage all lowered their eyes to avoid the judge's eyes. He actually gave such a high evaluation? Iman was shocked. He had never heard such a compliment in the past 10 years. Even in the past 3 chefs' competitions, he had never heard such a compliment from his master. "It's over. It's really over," Dan Dunn murmured with a pale face. Even the strictest Julian had given such a high evaluation. It was very likely that Hades would get more than 90 points from the judges. That's all. Now, let's invite the judges to give their scores to Hades's dish. The host's voice sounded. The judges stopped discussing and began to give their scores with solemn expressions. So nervous. Will Brother Hades be able to turn the tables? Although he has received unanimous praise, Hades's chances of advancing to the next round are still slim. No one has scored more than 95 points in this year's Chef King competition. He has to get 96 points to advance. It's already unfair enough for the other contestants to be parachuted in. It's only right for them to be eliminated. The audience in front of their screens were also quite nervous. I really am conflicted. If I want little big brother Hades to be eliminated, he'll be mine, but I also want him to advance. I don't want to see his sad appearance after being eliminated. What should I do? On the top floor of the Twin Towers, a collie was biting the lamb chop in her hand with a conflicted look on her face. During the recording of the show, she couldn't get through to Nancy. The lamb chop was not from the show, but a substitute that the secretary had found for her at the last minute. It was the best roast lamb chop in Tucker City. The taste of the lamb chop in her hand wasn't bad, but she still wanted the one Hades roasted. She could tell that Nancy had taken an interest in Hades, which was why she said those shameless words. The Chef King competition, to put it bluntly, was the McCarthy Manor Chef Selection competition. This was something that everyone in the chef circle was well aware of. Because of this, the chefs were even more eager to participate in the competition, hoping to join the McCarthy family. Being chosen by one of the 10 great families meant that they wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing, as well as having a high status. Of course, she had everything Nancy had and she had even more. A collie sent Meg a private message in the background before continuing to watch the show. A minute of scoring passed in the blink of an eye. The judges put down the scoreboard in their hands and waited for the results. Then, the program team sneakily inserted a live broadcast advertisement. Hades's score was about to be revealed, deciding if he could make a comeback and advance to the top 4. This was the peak of the show's viewership, with 130 million people watching the broadcast. So Johnson made a deal with the boss of a company, offering $100 million for a 20-second commercial. Meg called this profiteer in his heart, but he couldn't help feeling a bit nervous. This feeling was the same as when he didn't know that his family was rich, silently waiting for the college entrance exam results to come out. After a long 20 seconds, Meg's score was revealed in the comments that filled the screen. Judges' total score: 96. Overall score: 89. Ranking: 3. Meg looked at the score on the screen and finally revealed a relaxed smile. It was a bit better than expected, but it was also a bit more dangerous than expected. The 4th place had a score of 88. If it wasn't for his actions before the competition, giving him a large amount of traffic, without the 3 PK points, he would have already been eliminated. This
How is this possible?
Denton had a look of despair. From the auditions to the top 8, he had never seen a contestant get a score of 96. This guy, on the other hand, got such a terrifying score in his first competition. So strong. Angelina looked at Meg, her beautiful eyes full of splendor. Although she was in first place, she only got 93 points from the judges. She was a little proud that she had set the record for the highest judges' score in this year's competition. She didn't expect that Meg would break the record in the blink of an eye and raise it to 96 points. This guy is a monster. Iman looked at Meg with a dignified expression. 96 points meant that at least 6 judges gave Meg full marks, which meant that they were very satisfied with the dish. Meg's PK points were only 3 points, but he was still in third place. His overall score was only 0. 6 points lower than Iman's. But what was more frightening was that he had just announced his participation in the competition this morning. When everyone thought that his PK point should be 0, he actually had 3 points. Congratulations to Hades for advancing to the top 4. W. He got 96 points. He is the second highest judge in the history of the Chef King competition. He is the highest judge in this competition. This contestant who came to the rescue is too strong, isn't he? It feels so good to make a comeback. I'm a fan. The audience was also restless.
Chapter 24:43. So, what am I nervous about?
Below the stage, she loosened her fists with a smile on her lips.
But is this all part of his plan? Since the post this morning?
She looked at Meg with curiosity in her eyes. Meg did not show any signs of discomfort when she came to the buried city. He made all kinds of arrangements with ease, and his constant trickery gave her the illusion that she was a fake buried city resident. His extraordinary performance in the professional field had successfully convinced the judges to give him a rare high score and advance to the semi-finals.
For the mission, he had taken a step forward. The semi-finals were out.
First place was Angelina with 92 points, second place was Iman, and third place was Meg with a slight lead of
0.4 points. The other 4 contestants were eliminated.
Referee, I have a question.
Denton stood up with grief and indignation.
Everyone looked at him with pity in their eyes. According to the original script, he should have successfully advanced to the top 4 by now, instead of being pitifully swept into the elimination list like he was now.
The referee looked in the director's direction. Johnny nodded slightly, indicating that he could make his statement.
Contestant Johnny, do you have any questions?
The referee looked at him and asked.
Johnny pointed at Meg and said, Hades just joined the King of Chefs competition this morning and his basic PK value is 0. It's only been a few hours, so how did his online score reach 3 points?
That's impossible.
The other contestants had similar expressions as they looked at the referee and judges.
This is indeed strange.
Dave nodded. As a veteran judge for 3 years, he knew that Hades's PK value had exceeded 30 million by the time he reached the quarterfinals. Although this score was far lower than the average score of the contestants, it was already beyond the normal threshold for a contestant who had just joined the competition less than 5 hours ago. In the face of the contestants' and judges' doubts, the referee calmly raised his hand and said, Director, please switch to the real-time PK list.
A list of the semi-finals appeared on the big screen.
Angelina was at the top of the list with 150 million points, followed by Iman with 130 million points, and Hades with 35 million PK value was at the bottom of the list. 35 million, and the number was still rising at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, the score calculation formula appeared on the screen. According to the formula, Meg's current online score was 3-1, an increase of 0-1 from the previous score. What did this guy do? This was the most shocking thought in the minds of the judges and contestants.
Are you kidding?
Hades is Brother Justice with over 100 million fans on the internet.
I understand.
After all, the contestants and judges have been offline for 2 hours. They don't know that times have changed. If you and I don't vote, when will Brother Justice reach the top?
Brother, go and vote for me.
The netizens were overjoyed.
Denton almost lost.
Are you crazy? This is the live broadcast of the King of Chefs competition?
Even if I not.
But at this moment, his manager's slightly trembling voice exploded in his ears, instantly waking him up. The rest of his words were stuck in his mouth, and he didn't dare to say them out loud. This is unbelievable. I'm convinced. Congratulations. Hades. Denton tried to control his emotions and squeezed out a smile at Meg. Thank you. Meg looked at Denton's smile, which was uglier than a crying face, and found it funny. The smile on his face became even brighter. After the contestants' doubts were resolved, the program team kindly gave the eliminated contestants time to bid farewell to the stage. Although this was a cooking competition, because of the many halos and popularity, the contestants themselves already had the attributes of celebrities. In the past, most of the top 8 contestants would sign a contract with Mocha Group's management company and debut according to their attributes. The eliminated contestants bid farewell to the stage, and the qualified contestants successfully took their seats. While the judges congratulated them on their success, they also announced that the semi-finals would be held tomorrow. The rules of the competition would be announced on the spot tomorrow. At this point, the 2.5-hour semi-finals of the King of Chefs competition came to an end. The live broadcast is over. Thank you all for your hard work, said Johnny as he took off his headphones and stood up. The cameras were all turned off, and the judges also got up one after another to move their stiff bodies that had been sitting for more than 2 hours. The contestants got off the stage and were taken away by their respective managers. Did you help me gain fans? Meg followed she down the long corridor and asked through telepathy. No. She shook her head. Isn't 30 million a little too much? Meg still found it hard to believe. The incident this morning is still brewing. At the same time, the King of Chefs competition also gave us a huge boost in popularity, explained she. Has Horace been arrested? Meg stopped smiling and asked. Charlie and Bart have been arrested by the investigation department, but Horace hasn't been arrested yet. Given how ruthless Fergus is, it's questionable whether Horace is still alive or not. Meg shook his head and pondered for a moment before saying, Give me Horace's location. I know you can get it. What do you want to do? She stopped and looked at him with deep eyes. As I said, justice may be late, but it will never be absent. Meg smiled. This kind of thing should be left to the investigation department. What you're doing is not in line with the rules of Buried City. She shook her head. Killing him to silence him is in accordance with the rules of the dungeon. Meg's smile had a hint of mockery. That's right. They were the ones who set the rules in the first place. She kept quiet and continued walking. He should be put on trial to atone for those girls who died unjustly and were still trapped in their nightmares. He shouldn't die quietly and be disguised as a suicide, Mag said as he looked at she's back. She took a deep breath and looked back at him. According to the rules of the show, contestants are not allowed to leave Mocha Building during the competition without permission. So, you have to leave your bracelet in the building. You only have 2 hours. I think you're getting cuter. Meg smiled brightly and followed her. 10 minutes later, Sheep drove the flying car out of Tucker Building. Women's clothing is a little awkward, but the dress is pretty cool. Meg took off the balaclava and unbuttoned the tight-fitting dress. There was a red on the screen that was located in a mountain valley 3,000 kilometers west of Tucker City. It was currently parked. This should be Horace's location. Let's go and meet this scumbag. Meg turned on the autopilot and started to change. End of chapter. Chapter 2444. Horace stood on top of a boulder in an uninhabited valley filled with strange rocks, looking anxiously to the east. 15 minutes ago, he had managed to get in touch with Fergus. Young Master Fergus agreed to help him escape capture on account of his many years of loyalty. He would be given a new identity, and he would leave Tucker City for a small town in the northwest. The Dixon family had a branch there, and he would become the new CEO of the company. After 10 years, he would be allowed to return to Tucker City. With the Dixon family's power, he knew Fergus could do this easily. It's a small town, but it's still a company of the Dixon family. There should be many young and beautiful girls there. Horace was already looking forward to his life. A speck of light appeared on the horizon, and a flying car with a dark glow appeared on the horizon. Then, in the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of them. There was no sign on the car, and it hovered 5 meters in front of Horace like a ghost. Horace's face lit up, and he quickly jumped down from the boulder. The door opened, and a young man wearing black tights and sunglasses stepped out. He looked at Horace with a murderous expression.
Horace. Yes, I am Horace. Horace smiled and nodded.
He wondered why Fergus didn't send someone he knew. The young man in black opened his bracelet and confirmed Horace's identity. He looked around and smiled coldly.
You've picked a good place.
This place is very hidden, and it's not easy to find. I found it when I was choosing the location. Horace was proud, but he still urged, let's leave as soon as possible. I heard Charlie and Bart have been caught.
Where is your flying car?
The young man asked.
It's behind that boulder.
Horace waved his hand, and a flying car flew out from behind the boulder.
Good. We can go now.
The young man nodded and walked back to his flying car.
Should I change my bracelet now? Will we be tracked?
Horace followed behind the young man and raised his hand to show his bracelet. The young man walking in front suddenly stopped. When he turned around, his hand was already on Horace's throat. Looking at Horace's face, which had turned red in the blink of an eye, he shook his head and said, no need. The young master said that if they can't find you, it will be more troublesome. Horace's eyes widened in shock and pain as he looked at the young man who was holding him up by the throat with one hand. He said in a hoarse voice, He wants to silence me.
If you didn't silence them, they will soon find out that you committed suicide here because you couldn't face the punishment of life imprisonment. This is very reasonable.
The young man shook his head and increased the strength of his hand, preparing to completely end him. Horace's face was filled with despair. He already knew that Fergus was going to let this matter end here. The dead couldn't speak, and they could bear all the blame. White light had already appeared in front of his eyes, and he had no strength to resist or struggle.
His opponent was a level 8 expert, and he was completely suppressed. Right at this moment, a white light descended from the sky. Ding!
A slender black sword pierced into the stone. The black-clothed man's hand that was holding Horace was cut off by the sword. Blood splattered all over Horace's face. The young man let out a cry of pain, but he didn't care about the pain. A short three-edged spike appeared in his left hand, and he threw himself at Horace, who had fallen to the ground. A figure descended from the sky and kicked the black-clothed man in the waist, sending him flying and breaking dozens of stone pillars and strange rocks. The three-edged spike didn't pierce Horace's heart, but it still left a bloody wound on his thigh. Horace clutched his throat and fell to the ground. He ignored the pain in his thigh and looked at the black-clothed deacon in surprise. He said in a hoarse voice, "Save me.
I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you everything. Fergus wants to silence me.
I've laundered tens of billions of dollars for the Dixon family over the past few hundred years.
They want to silence me."
The black-clothed man was wearing a luxurious black robe and a black gold mask. He looked very noble and mysterious. His sharp eyes turned to the black-clothed young man who was pinned down by the huge rock, and he raised his hand. Bang! The black-clothed young man exploded without warning. The huge shockwave turned all the rocks within a 10-meter radius into dust. A suicide soldier?
Meg frowned.
This was far more vicious than a hidden weapon. Meg waved his hand to disperse the shockwave of the explosion. Horace looked at the rubble falling from the sky with lingering fear, but at the same time, he let out a sigh of relief. He didn't expect Fergus to send an assassin to kill him, let alone someone so ruthless.
"Thank you for saving me. Please take me away from here.
As long as you can guarantee my safety, I'll tell you everything I know."
Horace bowed to Meg.
Judging from the power displayed by this mysterious black-clothed man, he was at least a 10th-tier combatant. He just didn't know which faction he belonged to. What Horace didn't know was that on the micro-push screen, there was a room called Trial of Horace. The creator of the room was the Judge of Judgment. The live broadcast started with the black-clothed assassin strangling Horace. Then the black-clothed deacon descended from the sky, chopped off the assassin's arm, and sent him flying with a kick. With the entire internet searching for Horace, the sudden appearance of this live streaming room was instantly pushed to the front page after it was discovered. Fact. The Department of Investigation Services couldn't find Horace, but the streamer found him.
Trial of Horace? Is this a live broadcast of a trial? What a brutal scene.
Is this the legendary suicide soldier of a tycoon?
That's terrifying.
Even the Dixon family is involved.
Watch and cherish this. I feel like the streamer's account is going to be gone soon. Please help me cut him down. I'll send you a rocket.
The netizens were shocked by the bloody scene of the suicide soldier exploding, but they were also excited by the streamer's content.
Are you negotiating with me?
Meg stared at Horace. You know I want to live.
These are the only secrets I have left.
Horace grinned, revealing his cunning nature.
Unfortunately, I'm not interested in these.
Meg shook his head. He bent down and slowly pulled the black sword out of the rock. His voice was cold and solemn.
Horace, today, I will judge your crimes.
Over the past 300 years, you, Charlie, and Bart have sexually assaulted 362 women, including 62 underage girls.
18 of the victims committed suicide due to the humiliation. Over 100 of the victims were depressed. Do you plead guilty? End of chapter. Chapter 2445. Judging Horace's live stream quickly climbed on the micro-push interface and gained a lot of attention in a short period of time. After the sexual assault case was exposed by Hades, his amazing performance in the Chef King competition increased the attention of the case even more.
A highly respected director in the entertainment industry, an evergreen tree in the film industry, and a favorite in the film industry, was so immoral that he would do such a thing to hundreds of innocent girls and directly cause more than a dozen of them to commit suicide out of depression.
Such a contrast was shocking and infuriating. The investigation bureau quickly intervened, and Charlie and Bart were arrested one after another. However, Horace disappeared after escaping the film base, and they had no clue where to find him. Some netizens started a Find Horace campaign, and the number of people who responded had exceeded 10 million. Unexpectedly, before the investigation bureau and the netizens could find him, a live stream of judging Horace appeared on the micro-push. Moreover, the opening of the live stream was a critical hit.
The black-clothed man of sacrifice wanted to kill Horace, but his arm was cut off by a sword from the sky, and he self-destructed when he had no hope of escaping.
This kind of realistic scene brought a great shock to the audience. Horace's words in a panic also proved the existence of the legendary men of sacrifice of the plutocrats.
Of course, what surprised the audience even more was that the person who came was not from the investigation bureau, but a mysterious masked man in black.
More importantly, he was not there to arrest Horace, but to put him on trial. There was no court, and there were no victims present. There was only the suspect and the black-clothed man who called himself the judge. Professional lawyers had analyzed that in the Tucker City Supreme Court, which was increasingly cautious in sentencing sentences, the possibility of Horace being sentenced to death for his crimes was very low, and he might even be imprisoned for less than 50 years. With Horace's current age, he had a chance to walk out of prison alive. This result also caused a great deal of indignation on the internet. A bastard who caused hundreds of victims to fall into the mud could only get such a light sentence in the end. However, this judge had found Horace before the investigation bureau and started a live stream of the trial. Everyone was looking forward to what kind of trial he would give Horace. In the micro-push headquarters, Lucian, who had just fallen asleep, was hastily woken up by the operations director, Amos.
"What's the matter?"
Lucian, who had been interrupted by his afternoon nap, was a little unhappy. Horace was caught, Amos said nervously. He's just a director.
Without the help of the Dixon family, do you think he has the ability to escape the pursuit of the Department of Investigation Services?
Lucian's expression became more and more unhappy. No matter how big the problem was, they still came to him. No. He wasn't caught by the Department of Investigation. He was caught by a mysterious person who calls himself the judge. Furthermore, he opened a live stream on Weibo and is broadcasting Horace's trial live. Amos tapped on his wristband and switched to dual screen mode.
On one side was the live broadcast of the Nephilic judge, and on the other side was the replay of the previous live broadcast, starting from when the men of sacrifice in black was about to kill Horace.
Lynching. Lucian looked at the virtual screen.
His eyes widened, and his sleepiness disappeared. There were a lot of important elements in this video and it was very sensitive.
The Dixon family wanted to kill Horace to silence him, and they had even sent their most loyal men of sacrifice. From the looks of it, they were already very prepared. However, the scene was coincidentally witnessed by the judge, who even recorded it live. The ancient tycoons had existed for tens of thousands of years and were once the rulers of the underground city. Later, with the reform of the system,
they slowly retreated behind the scenes. However, they still controlled and influenced the underground city in certain ways. Of course, this kind of control was kept secret and was not known to the general public. The stories of the tycoons raising men of sacrifice and even private soldiers were only rumors on the internet. There was no concrete evidence. However, today's video directly hammered the Dixon family to death. Raising men of sacrifice and silencing them. Was this what a tycoon was like? Scared. To be honest, Lucian was also a little scared. He knew the power of the tycoons, but he did not expect them to be so decisive in silencing Horace. Sitting in this position, it was inevitable that he would offend some party. Would he encounter such a thing on the road one day? Should we close the live stream first? Amos asked. We can use the excuse of violating the law to prevent copycat crimes. Closing the live stream can please the Dixon family, but we might offend a few other families. Moreover, I have to confirm the military's opinion first. Lucian shook his head and tapped on his wristband to dial a number. He said, "Go back first and wait for my news." Okay. Amos left quickly. Soon, Lucian received a reply from the military. The public needs to vent their emotions. It's better to let them go. After pondering for a while, Lucian sent a message to Amos, telling him to wait and see. He would not interfere with the live stream for the time being. Bastard! Look at what you've done. A loud slap echoed in the villa. Fergus, whose face was half swollen, lowered his head in fear. He was the one who sent the men. To be safe, he specially sent a level 9 man of sacrifice. It was absolutely safe to kill Horace, who was only level 5. However, he did not expect that someone would come out of nowhere and kill the man of sacrifice that the Dixon family had carefully trained and capture Horace alive. What was more terrifying was that he actually broadcasted it all. The tycoons raising men of sacrifice was not a secret among the tycoons. The interests of such a large family involved all walks of life in the underground city. There were always some things that were inconvenient to deal with openly. At this time, the men of sacrifice were the best players to deal with these matters. However, for the ordinary people, this was an absolute secret. It was something that could not be discussed on the table. However, this so-called judge tore apart this layer of fig leaf. Horace's words made it impossible for the Dixon family to hide. Don't interfere in this matter. I will solve it. From today onwards, you are grounded for 3 months, Mullen said coldly. Patriarch, the company still needs me to do many things. All your duties in the company are cancelled. We will talk about it again when you are able to do things safely. Mullen interrupted Fergus and looked at him coldly. Fergus felt his back was cold. He hurriedly lowered his head, agreed, and left quickly. Damn it! I must find that guy and tear him into pieces. After leaving the villa, Fergus' eyes were full of ruthlessness. He angrily punched the air, and the space distorted a little. Quickly locate the location and deploy the nearest force. However, warn them not to act rashly. The opponent's strength is at least a level 10 warrior. Seal the scene and wait for backup. In Tucker City, the chief of the investigation bureau looked away from the big screen and ordered. Chapter 2446. Horace's matter put a large amount of pressure on the investigation department's chief Packate. The military's statement made them have no choice but to intervene in this matter that had a large influence on the internet. The pressure from the Dixon family also gave him a headache. But now something that gave him an even bigger headache had happened. While the investigation department was still tracking Horace, someone had found him ahead of time and wanted to put him on trial, even broadcasting it live. Rumors of the investigation department's incompetence filled the air. This was simply slapping their faces. Damn it! Which idiot in the Dixon family is doing this? Packate silently cursed. He didn't mention this matter at first because he wanted to give the Dixon family some time to clean up their mess. Whether it was letting Horace disappear for a while or letting him disappear completely, everyone's faces would look better. But now this cover had been torn off. The Dixon family's attempt to silence him had been broadcasted live. The person that the investigation department couldn't find had been found by a mysterious person. The Dixon family should be distancing themselves from this matter, and he had a headache over how to remove the hat of incompetence that was placed on his head. Otherwise his promotion next month would fail. Very quickly, the technical staff had locked onto Horace's current location. It was 3,000 kilometers away from Tucker City, and it would take around 20 minutes to send people over. The nearest police station could reach the scene in about 10 minutes. Only this mountain branch's battle strength was limited, with the strongest being only at the 7th level, so they would only be delivering food if they went. The headquarters experts were all sent out, and there were even 2 battleships with them. He was actually caught on the spot. This little slut Fergus will suffer. Moreover, he saved me the money of finding an assassin. On the top floor of the Twin Towers, a collie was happily watching the broadcast. But, who is this handsome guy? Although he's wearing a mask, based on his figure and his deep and sexy voice, he should be a handsome guy with an aesthetic style, right? In the younger generation, there doesn't seem to be a handsome guy with this kind of strength and a sense of justice, right? A collie looked at the masked man on the screen and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. She wasn't angry at all because the other side had shamed the Dixon family. No, I just became a fan of Hades. I can't change my mind so quickly. That's immoral. However, Horus was exposed by Hades, and now he's being judged by this masked man. Both of them are super righteous. Yeah, as expected of me. I'm a fan now. In just a few minutes, the number of people who had entered Nephilic Judge's live stream through various channels had exceeded 10 million, and it was increasing at a terrifying speed. Meanwhile, in the valley, Meg pointed his sword at Horus, who was slumped on the ground. Meg had watched many movies when he was learning the dungeon common tongue, including a few movies directed by Horus. He had to admit that Horus was indeed outstanding when it came to making movies. This was also the reason why he was able to sweep through many film festivals and gain the favor of the Dixon family. However, talent was not an excuse for committing a crime. Before the victims were violated, they probably would never have thought that this respected senior in the circle would do such a beastly thing to them. You can't judge me. My crimes can only be judged by the court. Horus panicked. He thought of an old movie called The Judge. The movie was about a time thousands of years ago when the law was not yet perfect. The rich and powerful ran amok, and the common people had no way of making a living. A mysterious masked man, who called himself the judge, judged and executed the rich and powerful who had committed heinous crimes. The movie caused a great deal of controversy at the time, and there were many cases of copycat crimes. As a result, the movie was included in the list of banned films. The man in front of him, who called himself the judge, was going to judge him here. You are really stubborn and unrepentant. Meg sneered under the mask. He looked down at Horus and said coldly, for more than 300 years, you have been hiding in the shadows of the Dixon family. You have persecuted innocent girls and blocked their voices. Your crimes are too numerous to list. I hereby sentence you to death with 362 swords. You will be executed immediately. As soon as he finished speaking, a rusty blunt sword appeared in his hand, and the sharp black sword was put away. What are you doing? You are committing a crime. Horus's voice was trembling. He supported his body and backed away. Then, he hit a huge rock hard. There was no way out. The first sword is for the girl called Lost Dierve. Meg raised the sword in his hand and slashed at the root of Horus's troubles. The second sword is for the girl in red who jumped into the lake. The sword slowly pierced Horus's thigh. The third sword is for... Horus's screams did not affect the speed of Meg's sword swinging. The blunt sword pierced through the flesh, and the uneven blade cut into the muscles. The pain was greatly amplified. Meg didn't enjoy this process, but at this moment, he felt that every thrust of his sword was a little heavy. This is great. My gloominess for the whole day was gone. 362 swords. Is this for each victim? How thoughtful. This is what torture should be like. If I had used a sharp sword, that old man would have had it easy. The judge has returned. Tremble, bad guys. The bullet screen was flooded, and the emotions of the netizens were stirred up. In the slums of Tucker City, in a narrow and dim room, a thin middle-aged woman looked at the blurry image on her bracelet with tears streaming down her face. She held a dark yellow teddy bear in her arms. She gently stroked the teddy bear and whispered, "Kesha, someone has avenged you. That bad guy has finally been judged." In the film city, a film crew was filming. The second female lead who was about to appear on stage suddenly broke down. After apologizing, she covered her face and ran to the bathroom. She locked the door and squatted in a corner. She looked at Horace, who was being pierced by swords. She covered her mouth and laughed, but her tears ruined her makeup. Next to a garbage dump in an alley, a dazed woman sat on the side of the street, watching the live broadcast in the bakery across the street. Suddenly, a glimmer of light appeared in her dull eyes. She staggered up from the ground and walked step by step to the floor-to-ceiling window of the bakery. Then she grinned and her eyes became clearer.
Chapter 2447.
The sword in Meg's hand was steady. Every stab hit a non-fatal spot, and at the same time, he was able to inflict enough pain on Horace. In order to maintain Horace's consciousness and vitality so that he could fully experience the pain of every stab, Meg even fed him a few healing pills every time he opened his mouth to cry out in pain. It was the kind of medicine that could be bought at any pharmacy in the underground city.
It was not expensive, but the effect was quite significant. "Kill me. I know I was wrong. Just kill me." Horace's voice was filled with fear and pain. He suddenly regretted not cooperating with the killer and giving himself a quick death. Fresh blood slowly flowed from the wounds. The healing pills kept him awake like never before, and he could clearly feel the intense pain of every wound. As his deep and emotionless voice recited one stab after another, some images appeared in his mind. They were the women he violated. He used to enjoy their resistance, and their futile struggle only made him more excited. At this moment, a sharp sword appeared in their hands as they stabbed at him with a ferocious expression. They were here for revenge.
They gathered their humiliation into this sword and stabbed it into his body.
The 208th stab, for the girl who loved the blue sea but could not be buried by the sea. Meg's voice was still emotionless. The blunt sword in his hand pierced into Horace's elbow, severing the tendons and bones and removing the joint.
However, his eyes swept across the cliff in the distance.
3 figures appeared on the cliff. The silver emblem on the arrowhead reflected a faint light.
It was the people from the Investigation Bureau.
10 minutes. Not bad.
However, the leader was only a level 7. Although the sniper had locked onto him, he did not shoot.
The nearby branch should have arrived earlier, right? Meg had a brief conversation with she earlier. It would take 20 minutes for the Investigation Bureau from Tucker City to arrive. In order to avoid a direct confrontation with the Investigation Bureau, he needed to leave this place before their main force arrived.
Meg gave 30% of his attention to the members of the Investigation Bureau, who appeared on the opposite cliff and sped up the execution.
The other party probably did not have an anti-material rifle of she's level, but it was better to be safe than sorry. It would be embarrassing if they failed miserably. "Captain, what should we do now?" On the cliff, 3 scouts were hiding between a boulder and a shrub.
One of them was driving a black heavy sniper rifle, and had already locked onto the black figure in the valley below. They were now 5 kilometers away from the valley, completely within the effective killing range of the sniper rifle.
"He has already discovered us." The sniper released his finger from the trigger and sounded a little depressed.
He believed that he had been careful enough to conceal himself, but the moment he took aim, the other party still discovered them.
This sniper rifle could allow him to kill enemies beyond his level from 5,000 meters away. If the enemy was unaware, he could even kill a level 10 powerhouse with one shot.
But when he saw the man's pitch-black eyes under the mask through the scope, even his soul trembled a little.
That feeling had already surpassed the pressure brought to him by a 10th-tier powerhouse. He chose to give up on trying to snipe a super expert who might surpass level 10. "The orders from above are for us to stay on guard and keep an eye on them. Don't let them leave so easily and wait for the main force to arrive," the captain said in a deep voice. "That bastard deserves to die. How many girls have he harmed?" The squad member on the side muttered. "You can say this in private, but don't say it when the people from the headquarters arrive. Be careful not to lose your hat," Quark said with a smile.
Looking at the scene of the execution that was going on below the valley, his gaze was also somewhat complicated.
Back then, he had chosen to leave the Tucker City headquarters and come to this remote forest branch because he could not stand the bureaucratic style.
The laws written on the surface were the same, but there was a difference in the actual punishment that fell on people. For a guy like Horace, there were a bunch of case records and evidence in the headquarters, but for more than 300 years, he was still active in various major film festivals and was still earning more than $1 billion to film big-budget movies.
Even though the military had been getting stronger over the years, it was still beyond their reach when it came to these matters.
He had also paid attention to Horace's case this morning, but according to the usual practice, Horace would either be hidden or silenced by the Dixon family, or he would be sent to prison for a relatively short term by influencing the verdict. After the limelight died down, he would be released on medical parole for various reasons. The Criminal Investigation Bureau did not even have the right to beat the dogs reared by the plutocrats, let alone seek justice for the victims. He did not expect such a ruthless person to appear halfway through the Dixon family's attempt to silence him. It was a live broadcast on the internet, a live trial, and an execution on the spot. Although he knew that this was against the law, his heart was slightly shaken at the moment. If it were not for this so-called judge, when would the injustice of those innocent girls be upheld? How long would those wretched men who were still reaching their dirty hands to those helpless girls continue to be arrogant? This guy had removed the cloth that covered everyone's shame. At this moment, those guys should be feeling fear, right? The Investigation Bureau has sent out 2 battleships and 8 level 10 powerhouses. They will enter the battle range in 8 minutes. You must evacuate in 5 minutes. She's voice came from Meg's earpiece and 2 red dots that were rapidly approaching appeared in his line of sight.
The time is just right.
Meg pulled the sword out of Horace's bloodied body and stabbed him in a relatively clean spot.
362 stabs.
This was Meg's revenge for those recorded victims, but there were probably many victims who kept this matter to themselves for various reasons.
Kill me, please kill me. I'll tell you everything I know.
Fergus from the Dixon family was also involved. He killed a girl with his own hands and buried her under a big tree outside the film city. I also know a lot of things about the circle. As long as you promise to kill me next time, I'll tell you everything. Horace was on the verge of breaking down.
He only wanted to die.
Meg's sword paused for a moment. He looked at Horace and asked, "You said that Fergus killed a girl and buried her under the tree outside the studio?
Is this true?"
It's true. He took a liking to that girl, and asked me to bring her to his room. The girl resisted, and he killed her. We took care of her body together, so it's true. Horace nodded hurriedly, and looked at Mag with bloodshot eyes. You can kill me now, right? As an accomplice, I'll add 1 more stab. Meg's voice was cold as he stabbed with the blunt sword.
Chapter 2448.
Isn't Fergus the president of the cast group? He was named one of the top 10 Mr. of the Year by a fashion magazine. He's also a direct descendant of the Dixon family. I heard that he's a strong contender for the next family head.
Scum.
Is this what a tyrant looks like? Fuck. I feel like my worldview has been completely shattered today. What's wrong with this world? Is this the real world? Lock the doors and windows. I'm a little scared now. The bullet screen decreased significantly, but the anger was gradually accumulating. No one would have thought that the high and mighty tycoons would be so filthy and terrifying. At that moment, the live stream was suddenly cut off. The live stream had been banned by Weibo. Hundreds of millions of viewers watching the live stream were suddenly homeless.
Crazy.
Almost at the same time, the sound of bracelets being smashed could be heard all over the dungeon. The homeless viewers in the live stream swarmed into the front row of the trending searches and began to vent their anger at Weibo. Dog Weibo, did you ban the live stream because it threatened your master's interests? Tycoon in front of others, murderer in private. Unban Weibo from today onwards. Meg noticed that the live stream had been banned. He wasn't too surprised. In fact, he was surprised that the live stream had lasted for so long. After all, Horace's previous comments were equivalent to dragging the Dixon family down. However, the banning of the live stream didn't affect the pace of his execution. He changed his mind and decided to spare Horace's life for the time being. Therefore, he began to dig up dirt on the Dixon family from Horace, including how they used him to launder money, the murder case that Fergus was involved in, and other criminal scandals. The live stream was forced to stop, but the recording of the video continued. 363 swords. Not 1 more, not 1 less. However, Meg spared Horace's life. Other than his life, his hands, legs, and the source of his crimes were far away from him. When the 5-minute countdown ended, Meg fed Horace enough healing pills to last until the Department of Investigation arrived. Then, he turned into a shadow and disappeared from the valley. On the opposite cliff, The three investigators blinked their eyes and were stunned when they saw the man in black disappear into the valley.
Why did he suddenly disappear? The team member jumped up and scanned the canyon with his binoculars. The life sign detector showed that there was only a weak life sign left in the canyon. He's gone. It's exactly 363 swords, but that bastard isn't dead yet. Let's hurry over. Quark leaped up and jumped onto the flying car beside him, rushing down the valley. He didn't know why the director had suddenly changed his mind and didn't kill Horace directly, but he knew that the director was going to have a headache. This was much more troublesome than receiving a corpse. After entering the half-step transcendent realm, Meg's speed had greatly increased, and coupled with his recent mastery of riding sword flight, his burst of speed was comparable to Shishi's starship. Therefore, 3 minutes later, Meg had already appeared in a dense forest 300 miles away. Meg put away his sword and prepared to take out his flying car. A black warship suddenly appeared in the sky above the forest. Meg gripped his sword. Come up. The hatch below the warship opened and Shi's voice rang in his ears. Why are you here? Meg was a little surprised, but he still jumped into the warship. The hatch closed and the warship started up silently. It activated stealth mode and quietly disappeared into the horizon. Meg stepped into the cockpit and looked at Shi, who was sitting in the main pilot seat. He smiled and said, "A new warship? The operation this time is highly confidential, so it's inconvenient to use my warship." She turned on autopilot and got up from the main pilot seat. She looked at Meg with a complicated gaze. "I know I'm handsome, but you don't have to stare at me like that. After all, I already have a wife and a child." Meg took off his mask and smiled. "The waters of a corporation run deep. You won't be able to grasp it," she said in a low voice. "I've always been straightforward. As for how deep the waters run, I don't need to think about it. I'm only responsible for muddying the waters." Meg tapped on his bracelet and asked, "How do I publish the video on the internet? It's not benevolent to push it, but it shouldn't be stuck on every platform, right?" "Did you kill him?" "No, I left him alive. He definitely won't live anyway, but it'll be interesting to see who kills him." Meg's smile had a hint of slyness. She fell silent. She quickly understood Meg's meaning and said, "I'll have to ask my superiors about this." "Then you'll have to hurry or he'll die." 3 minutes later, she helped Meg publish the entire trial video on the internet. As expected, the video was banned from the internet within 3 minutes. "You underestimated the influence of a corporation," she said to Meg as she looked at the grayed-out video. "You underestimated the public's ability to spread resources." Meg left the cockpit with a smile and went to the lounge. The closure of the trial live stream ignited the public's anger. However, 10 minutes later, the full version of Horace's trial was released on the internet and appeared on all the mainstream video websites. All the major platforms and websites reacted quickly and took the video down. However, the blocking of public channels couldn't stop the spread of the video. Netizens used their various methods to make the video spread at a viral speed. Even scalpers were eyeing the business of selling videos. Meg knew from the beginning that the video was the only thing that could be widely spread. After all, only a small number of people were able to witness it in the live stream. The latter half of the video sent chills down the audience's spine and chills down their spines. The corporation was above ordinary people and did whatever they wanted. Their actions were the law and they were thoroughly analyzed. At the end of the video, the judge did not kill Horace. Instead, he cut off his arms and legs and spared his life. Since the witness was still there, it was up to the investigation department to handle the rest. The Fergus rape and murder case, the Dixon family's money laundering case, and some dirty business in the circle were all cases that the investigation department had to investigate. "System, have you learned enough?" Meg asked loudly as he closed the door of the lounge and lay on his bed. The words, "system learning," flashed across his mind. The system was silent as the words continued to float across. "Useless. I let you connect to the internet, but you still haven't learned." Meg pursed his lips and was about to quit. In order to understand this world better, the first thing Meg did after entering the underground city was to connect the system to the underground city's internet and plunder the technology of the underground city. The system's technology level was lower than the underground city's because it was compatible with the Norland continent. However, the system had unlimited potential. After all, it was created by the Heavenly Tao.
Using the system's explanation, it meant that the 1000T network disk was only filled with 1 G of stuff. It could definitely store more stuff and increase its capacity. The underground city's filming methods are really impressive. The system's voice suddenly sounded. End of chapter. Chapter 2449. Is the piece you're looking at serious? Meg frowned and could not help but ask. That's definitely serious. The system said with certainty. Have you learned it? It's really not easy to learn. Let's be serious. I asked you to help me find the source and information of the divine monument. Do you have any leads? Meg's expression became more serious as he asked in his heart. In this trip to the underground city, Meg's main goal was the divine monument that recorded the secret to becoming a god. Although he had a certain degree of empathy for the oppressed people in the underground city, he was not so saintly as to immediately put himself in the role of the underground city's savior. With the system's help, it's naturally easy. The system has flipped through a lot of top-secret information and can say with absolute certainty that the stone monument did indeed fall from the sky. The timeline is the same as the information you've read before. So, Ferdinand is quite sincere. Meg nodded slightly and asked again. Where is the divine monument now? How are the guards? The divine monument is located in the center of Tucker City. Its aura and appearance are covered by a formation. Under the divine monument, there is an extraordinaire guarding it all year round. There are also 4 half-step extraordinaires who take turns guarding it. It is the most heavily guarded place in the entire underground city. Of course, this does not include the many high-level warships that are always on standby. Meg frowned. His plan to sneak a look at the divine monument had been extinguished. 1 extraordinaire and 4 half-step extraordinaires guarding it. It could be seen that the underground city valued this divine monument. However, this was not difficult to understand. The divine monument hid the secret to becoming a god and directly opened up the technology tree for the underground city. It would be strange if it was not valued. Since you can't observe it personally, have you found any pictures or videos of the divine monument? Meg asked again. He had tried to search for pictures of the divine monument on the internet, but did not find any relevant content. The divine monolith cannot be recorded by anything, so there are no pictures or videos. Moreover, according to the people who have comprehended the divine monolith, everyone sees a different divine monolith, and the things they comprehend are also different from person to person. The system replied. It is indeed very mystical. Looks like I still have to complete Ferdinand's mission properly, Meg thought to himself. What the system said was quite similar to a rumor he had heard before. Sitting on the returning warship, Pashate's eyelids twitched as he watched the video his subordinate had just sent him. By the time they arrived at the scene of the live broadcast, the mysterious Inquisitor had already disappeared. All that was left was Horace, who had been sliced into pieces. Even though he had worked in the investigation agency for 500 years, Pahat had rarely seen such a tragic corpse. Oh no, Horace is still alive. The assassin stabbed Horace 363 times, but he didn't kill him. Instead, he gave Horace a handful of healing pills before he left, which kept him alive until they arrived at the scene. Although Horace's injuries were terrifying, none of them were fatal. His life was no longer in danger with the help of the healers. It seemed that they had arrived just in time. However, Pahat wanted to slap himself in the face. Horace was still alive. That meant he had a lot of things to worry about. Should he investigate the Fergus murder case? The witnesses were still there, but the physical evidence had already been investigated by the local branch. Should he investigate the Dixon family's money laundering case? The accusation that Horace had made at the last minute was very clear, even down to how much money had been laundered by which movie. If Horace was dead, there would be a lot of leeway for them to maneuver around the situation. However, not only was Horace still alive, but the mysterious person had also posted the whole process of the trial on the internet. The whole world knew that Horace was still alive. If he was dead, then he would be dead for sure. Watch Horace carefully. You must bring him back alive. Pahat turned off the video and instructed his subordinates. Although this matter was a headache, it was the Dixon family's fault. He didn't have to be so stubborn as to take the blame. He just had to do his job well. This time it's interesting. Damn slut.
See if I don't kill you this time. Akali was lying on the sofa as she sent a few messages on her wristband.
She looked up at the secretary standing on the side and ordered, "Release all the black material we have. I want that slut to never be able to rise again."
Young miss, if we release it now and the family head finds out, wouldn't it?
The secretary said in a hesitant voice.
Idiot, don't you know how to not let the family head know? Akali rolled her eyes.
She sat up and her expression became much colder. This fellow is a sex fiend. Even you were almost violated by him.
If we let him go now, who knows how many girls will suffer in the future?
The secretary seemed to have thought of something and his eyes filled with a bit of anger. He said with a nod, I'll go now."
After taking care of Fergus, there are only 2 left. Little brother Hades really is my lucky star. Akali's lips slightly curled. She opened the chat and saw that her message to Hades was still unread. She slightly knit her brows. This is the first man that doesn't even read my message. Meg ended his conversation with the system and the system was in a hurry to learn, so he also opened the chat. On the hot search list, Roasted Lamb Chop Tutorial, Hades Promotion, and Chef King Tournament Top 4 were still in the front row. As for the trial of Horace and Fergus, there was nothing at all. The power of capital was displayed at this moment. Of course, the emotions of the people couldn't be stopped. Although the chat removed the hot searches, lowered the popularity, and blocked the keywords, when one opened the hot search list, the comments below were all discussing this matter. Of course, the most mentioned sentence was, "Justice may be late, but it will never be absent." Meanwhile, Mag's tweet in the morning had already exceeded 100 million likes. And the number of comments had also exceeded 10 million. But looking at the data, Meg thought that he had hired a water army and it was the kind that didn't have a brain. Meg thought for a bit and didn't release a new tweet. This wave of popularity, he didn't want to take advantage of it. Then he opened the private chat that was covered in red. There were probably several million people who had sent him messages and they were all praising him. There were even more people who were scolding him in private messages from his previous life. 2 levels of reversal? Meg stroked his chin. Being praised like this, he wasn't used to it. Then he found a pinned message. The golden glowing account was very dazzling and unusual, giving off the aura of a rich woman. Meg opened the message. "Little brother Hades, let's eat together tonight. I'll wait for you on the top floor of the Twin Towers." Meg thought for a bit before replying, "I'm sorry, I'm not free. If you like Daddy's Restaurant in the Otherworld, please bookmark it. Daddy's Restaurant in the Otherworld is updated the fastest in the new Booksy Pavilion." Chapter 2450. Is it all right if you don't have time? Akali looked at the reply she just received and her eyes opened wide. She had always been the one to reject others, but she never thought that she would be rejected today. It's just a simple meal and meeting. In order to wait for your reply, I waited an entire day. Akali sent another message. Based on the record, it's 1 hour and 8 minutes. Akali gritted her teeth in anger. There was actually this kind of straight man in this world. It was his fault for not replying, but he was still being picky. Humph, if it wasn't for your good looks, I wouldn't have spoiled you. Akali turned off the bracelet and took a few deep breaths before sending another message. Bow, then rest well. You've worked hard in the competition, moi. Turning off the bracelet, Akali buried her face in the sofa. What did I send? So disgusting. Meg looked like an old man looking at his phone with a question mark on his face. Is this how rich women chat these days? So oily. Turning off the bracelet, Meg didn't continue replying. His main goal now was to enter the McCarthy family through Nancy. At this time, he naturally couldn't flirt with the rich women of the Dixon family. They were all rich women, so he had to make a choice. It was a pity that the landmark Twin Tower building was destroyed. Has it really spread out completely? She looked at the comments on Weibo and the statistics that she had just received. The video that was banned from the internet swept the internet at a terrifying speed and almost became a household name. How did he know that this video would spread? She couldn't help looking in the direction of the lounge. She never thought that as an underground person, she would be taught a harsh lesson by Meg. Meg's actions were not within the plan and even violated the laws of the underground city to a large extent. But in her heart, she was a bit envious of Meg's straightforward actions. When she received the information in the morning, she was furious. However, she knew that under the influence of the tycoons, the information in their hands was only the tip of the iceberg. Meg, an outsider, directly tore apart the relationships between people of different social classes in a rude and unreasonable way, and directly pushed the deepest contradictions to the forefront. The anger of the masses had been ignited. This time, the Dixon family had to give an explanation to appease the anger of the masses. The tycoons were obviously not happy to see this happen, but she knew that there was one person who would be happy to see it happen. That was why she appeared outside the canyon to pick up Meg. This solidified world seemed to show signs of loosening because of Meg's arrival. She was even looking forward to what kind of storm this legendary existence who once stirred up the Norland continent would stir up in the buried city. Ding! She's bracelet beeped. She glanced at it with a slightly strange expression before sending a message to Meg. Nancy wants to see me? Are all the fair-skinned, rich and pretty girls in the underground city so impatient? Meg muttered as he walked out of the lounge. He looked at she and said, "Do you have any more detailed information about Nancy's preferences?" Meg sneaked back to the contestants' dormitory in the Mocha building, which was no challenge for him. Then, he changed into casual clothes. Under the guidance of the staff, he went to the restaurant on the top floor of the Mocha building to have lunch with Nancy. Nancy invited him to lunch through she. I didn't expect to have to face the unspoken rules when I just entered the entertainment industry. Meg could not help but grumble, but he did not resist in his heart. He participated in the Chef King competition to sneak into the McCarthy family. If he could enter through Nancy, the result would be the same. The restaurant on the top floor was extremely luxurious. The staff led Meg to a private room and stood at the door. He opened the door and smiled at Meg. "Mr. Hades, please come in." "Thank you." Meg nodded slightly and entered the private room. The door slowly closed behind him. The decoration in the private room was simple but luxurious. It was decorated with crystals and gems. In front of the floor-to-ceiling window, a young girl was sitting by the window. She was quiet and beautiful. "Miss Nancy." Mag stopped in his tracks and greeted Nancy. "Mr. Hades, please take a seat." Nancy raised her hand and gestured with a quiet smile on her face. Meg sat down opposite Nancy and looked at her. He went straight to the point. "Miss Nancy, why did you call me here?" According to the information provided by she, Nancy preferred to deal with straightforward people. "I invited Mr. Meg here to celebrate your advancement to the top 4. I'm also curious about you and want to know you personally." Nancy was also straightforward, but she still added, "I'm the person in charge of the Chef King competition. It's my job to know every top 4 contestant." "Don't quibble." Meg smiled and said, "Thank you. You can ask me anything you want to know. You don't have to be so formal. I just want to know more about you." She's hand gently slid across the table and the menu appeared on the table. "You probably haven't had lunch yet. Order first." The food on the top floor had to be better than the contestants' meals, so Mag naturally wouldn't stand on ceremony. He picked the signature dishes and ordered 2 servings. He had gone out to work, and indeed hadn't had his lunch yet. After ordering, Nancy looked at Meg and said with a smile while waiting for the dishes to be served, "You're the first contestant in the history of the Chef King competition to go viral on the first day of the competition. I didn't expect an accidental tweet to turn out like this." Meg's smile was a little helpless. "I admire your sense of justice." Nancy looked at Meg and did not hide her admiration. It's rare to see this kind of quality nowadays. I think there's still a seed of justice in everyone's heart. It's just that the way to express it is different. Meg said frankly, "I'm no different. Humility is also a very good quality." "You're right." Meg smiled but did not say anything. He actually felt his old face was a little red. Horace didn't die, but the things he revealed in the end made the Dixon family look bad. They may take revenge on you, just like the assassination this morning. Nancy suddenly stopped smiling and said with a serious expression, "Death is inevitable. Perhaps it's heavier than Mount Tai, or fire is lighter than a goose feather. If I had a choice, I hope it's the former," Meg said calmly. Nancy looked at Meg's bright eyes. They were as clean and clear as a clear spring at the top of a snowy mountain. She could not help but be a little dazed and moved. "What a great phrase," Nancy praised in her heart.
She only felt that the man in front of her had a higher image in her heart. There were probably very few people in the world who could be as calm and collected as he was in front of a corporation.
Mr. Hades, on behalf of the McCarthy family, I invite you to be the special chef of McCarthy Manor. The McCarthy family will protect your safety.
Nancy got up and solemnly extended her hand to Meg.
End of chapter. Chapter 2451.
Meg looked at that white and slender hand. That tender white skin was glowing and his mood became a bit strange. He never thought that in just the first round of the competition, the goal of entering the McCarthy family was already completed. It was so fast that he felt like it wasn't real. Nancy looked at Meg's serious expression. As expected, he wasn't someone who accepted charity from others. Just as she was about to retract her hand and explain herself, a large warm hand held hers.
Young Miss Nancy, I'm very grateful for your help.
I'm willing to become the special chef of the McCarthy Manor. It is my honor.
Meg stood up to take Nancy's hand and said with a faint smile. The chance to live off a woman was fleeting, so of course he had to grasp it. In order to complete his mission, Meg didn't mind doing this. Hades was living off a woman. What did that have to do with Megshin? Meg's smile was warm and clean. Nancy was a bit dazed, but when she came back to her senses, she felt that the hand being held was a bit warm. Her face turned red and she quickly took her hand back. Hades had accepted her proposal, which was very normal. It was very hard for the chefs of the dungeon to reject this invitation. According to convention, she would choose the champion of the Chef King competition to join the McCarthy Manor as a special chef. The McCarthy family would provide him with a rich salary and a strong shelter. Meg had only participated in a single competition, and she had already extended an olive branch to him. The main reason was because of the delicious roasted lamb chop, and another reason was that a collie had just called her and asked for Hades. If a collie wanted someone, she, Nancy, definitely wouldn't give him to her. So when there was a storm in the city, she extended an olive branch to Hades, which was no different from sending charcoal in the snow. Being able to hire an outstanding chef like Mr. Hades is also our honor. Nancy sat down again and took a sip of the lemon water beside her, calming her chaotic heartbeat. Young Miss Nancy, do I still need to participate in the next competition? Meg also sat down again and asked Nancy this question. Yes, you will continue to participate in the next competition. I hope that you will do your best to display your culinary skills. Nancy nodded slightly and looked at Meg expectantly. I think the audience, like me, wants to know what other surprises you will bring us. I'll do my best. Meg smiled and nodded. That was right. He was now a real traffic whirlpool. Only by continuing to participate in the competition could he maintain the popularity of the Chef King tournament. After all, it was still a business. After that, Mag and Nancy chatted for a while. As Mag had read the history of the underground city and watched tens of thousands of movies of various genres, he could easily make Nancy giggle by asking her questions based on her preferences. An hour later, the pleasant mealtime was over. Meg took the initiative to leave. Mr. Hades is really an interesting person. Nancy watched the door of the private room slowly close with a smile on her face. She had never chatted so happily with a man. His knowledge was as vast as the ocean. His views were so profound, and his stand on certain matters was so consistent with hers. Originally, she only thought that she had recruited a chef with a strong sense of justice. But now, she felt that she had found a good friend. Hades gave her a completely different feeling compared to those rich second generations who only knew how to get drunk in bars and race cars late at night. Sure enough, I'm a professional at flirting. Meg looked at the system's feedback of Nancy's favorability towards him. It had increased from 62 when he entered to 82 when he left. 62 was the level of a passerby who had a slightly favorable impression of him. With Nancy's identity, this favorability was normal. 82 was different. It was the level of a good friend who had a good chat. Meg's intention to increase his favorability with Nancy was not to flirt with her. It was to prepare for the future when he entered the McCarthy family. He was not clear about the difficulty of the subsequent missions, so it was good to prepare in advance. It was not easy to come to the underground city, so naturally, he could not just stay in the contestants' dorm. Meg got a pass from She and drove the flying car out of the Mocha building for a ride. This mission is so simple. Are you sure you want me to visit the God Monument directly? Sitting in the driver's seat, Meg looked sideways at she who was sitting in the passenger seat and asked with a smile. Do you think you can become a god after visiting the God Monument? She asked. Ha! Meg was stunned. It seemed that he did think so. Visiting the God Monument, comprehending the laws and supernatural powers, and breaking through to godhood was very reasonable. More than 10,000 people are qualified to visit the God Monument every year. The core members of the rich families have a chance to visit the God Monument every year from the age of 10. Those who excel in military competitions and those who obtain military merits have a chance to visit the God Monument. All the powerhouses in the underground city who have broken through level 10 have a chance to visit the God Monument, she said calmly. Meg. How many times have you visited the God Monument? Meg asked with a heavy heart. 3 times, she said calmly. Meg. So, this is a reward that can be found anywhere? Meg felt that he was cheated. Visiting the God Monument varies from person to person. Some people only need to visit it once to get a great opportunity and become extraordinary. Some people can go thousands of times and still not get anything. You can think of it as a dispensable reward, but you can also think of it as an extremely precious chance to become a god. Meg nodded slightly, agreeing with Xi's statement. In this way, the God Monument was more like a blind box. No one knew what they could get out of it before they opened it themselves. However, becoming a god was a low-probability event. Even in the underground city with the God Monument, there had not been a new extraordinaire for 500 years. Where do you want to go? She asked. The Twin Towers. Meg entered a destination into the autopilot. You want to see a collie? She had a strange expression. But you just hooked up with Nancy. No, I just want to see what I just rejected. Meg shook his head and then corrected her seriously. What I did with Miss Nancy was not called hooking up. It was a very serious and friendly exchange. The light beam created a passage in the air and the flying car whistled through it without any obstruction. Tucker City was a huge city that accommodated 1.5 billion people. Tall buildings that were 1,000 meters tall could be seen everywhere, and there were rows upon rows of castles in the sky. There was also a world that extended 1,000 meters underground that could not be seen. This was a 3-dimensional city with different people living in different areas. In the center of the city was a high-tech office building. The most dazzling of them were the 2 twin towers that were built side by side like 2 giant golden towers. End of chapter. Chapter 2452. It said that if you sell these 2 buildings, you can buy an entire chaos city. Meg stopped the flying car by the side of the road and looked at the buildings that shone with golden light under the sun. The currencies of the 2 worlds can't be circulated. She raised her doubts seriously. I'm just lamenting a little. Meg's eyes fell on the top floor of one of the buildings. It was said that the woman who owned the most expensive house in the underground city lived on the top of the pyramid. From the intelligence, a collie is a fanatical groupie. She has more than 3 digits of fans, and none of them lasted for more than 3 days. She interrupted Meg's imagination. That's really the king of the Sea Kings. Meg was shocked. She brought Meg around Tucker City, and Meg gained a lot of knowledge. After passing through a commercial street, Meg was holding an exquisite cake in his hand. He said as he ate, I think if I open a restaurant here, I can become a tycoon in less than a year. She nodded slightly. She did not think that Meg was boasting. Do you think the underground city and the Norland continent will go to war one day? Meg suddenly turned to look at her and asked. She thought seriously for a while and nodded. It's entirely possible. In the Army's regular exercises, there's a targeted exercise in this regard. You're really frank. Meg criticized in his heart, but his heart was heavy. This is a reserved project, not proposed by the Marshal. Besides, even you can't guarantee that the Norland continent won't covet the underground city, she said. Yes, people are greedy. Meg nodded. He could not help but be tempted when he heard about the existence of the Divine Monument. On the way back, Meg turned on microblogging for a while. Horace's incident had evolved into various anti-harmony codenames, and it was still a hot topic on microblogging. Microblogging's disgusting approach to this incident had also angered the majority of netizens. Hence, on the official Dungeon petition website, there were more than 10 million signatures for petitions such as Remove the Micro Push,
and punish the micro-push for irregularities. According to the process, these two petitions had already entered the stage of official investigation. It was probably going to be a headache for the micro-push department. Apart from that, there was also the class representative's summary of the charcoal roasted lamb chop he made during the competition. It was made into a coherent instructional video, and the number of views had already exceeded 30 million. Trying to make a charcoal grilled lamb chop at home had even become a new trend. With the participation of several influential food bloggers and celebrities, this event had also attracted many people to participate. Because of this, the sales of the ovens in the dungeon skyrocketed. In the technologically advanced dungeon, it wasn't easy to find an oven that could burn charcoal. It was even harder to find a suitable charcoal. Meg clicked on a few videos of people crashing. Looking at the indescribable grilled lamb chops and the awkward but polite smiles on the faces of the people who shared the food, a smile appeared on his face. Many of these people had never cooked before. Failure was a good start. At least they had tried it themselves. After returning to the contestants' dormitory, Meg was about to ask the system for detailed information on Counselor Tam when he discovered that his believers had increased to 1210354, and it was still increasing at a rapid speed. Ding! Congratulations to the host for achieving 1 million believers. The system's voice sounded, and it set off fireworks in Meg's mind. Can you not be so tacky? Meg rolled his eyes. He couldn't stand the flashy fireworks in his mind. Isn't this a traditional celebration on Earth? The system was innocent. Where's the reward? Where's the special reward that you mentioned previously? Meg couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with the system. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the reward. Mind-controlling art. Please check. Meg looked at the golden scroll that appeared in his mind and frowned. Why did the style suddenly change to Xianxia? What's the mind-controlling art? Is it a heaven rank or earth rank technique? Please don't ridicule the host. This mind-controlling art is a spiritual energy control cultivation technique. It's not immortal cultivation and has no rank. To a certain extent, you can understand it as a type of magic. The system explained. Magic. I'm a warrior. Meg muttered in his heart, but he consciously opened the golden scroll. A sea of information suddenly appeared and filled his mind. He was very familiar with this feeling, so he quickly adapted to it and began to study this technique that was highly valued by the system. The so-called mind-controlling art, as the name suggested, was a type of spiritual energy control technique. Although the system used magic to explain it, it was actually a method to control one's spiritual energy to affect the outside world. It was fundamentally different from using magic to manipulate various elements. Of course, he wasn't too sure what a spiritual magician was like. After the number of believers broke through 1 million, Meg could feel that his spiritual energy had become more condensed and abundant. It far exceeded the spiritual energy that he should have at his level. And this mind-controlling art gave him a way to control the spiritual energy. Object control was the entry technique of the mind-controlling art. It was also a very practical technique. Meg's gaze turned to the teacup on the side table. Bang! The teacup cracked. Meg sat up and steadied his breathing. He followed the mind-controlling art's instructions and used his spiritual energy to look at the other teacup. The teacup wobbled and flew up from the coffee table. Then, it uncontrollably crashed into the wall at the side and shattered into pieces. What the hell, it's so difficult to use. Meg looked at the cleaning robot that had come out from under the bed and was automatically cleaning the broken pieces on the floor. He took a piece of paper from the side and casually folded it into the shape of a sword. Then, he stared at the sword and began to practice sword flight. Meg had tried to control his spiritual energy before and used it to his advantage. Sword flight was one of his good tricks. However, those were all tricks. Spiritual energy could only be used as a catalyst. The main thing was to rely on brute force to fly the sword. The soul-ruling art provided a plan to use mental strength as a form of energy. Although mental strength was ethereal, when one mastered the method of using it, one would discover that when this ethereal energy gathered together, it was actually a power that could not be underestimated. The paper sword flew in a crooked manner in the room. Sometimes it crashed into the wall, sometimes it crashed. But soon it had some sense of direction and trajectory. The next morning, Meg, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, opened his eyes. A paper sword hovered between his eyebrows, revealing its sharpness.
End of chapter. Chapter 2453.
With a thought, Meg sent the paper flying sword out of the 3mm gap in the window and into the sky.
When he went out for breakfast, Meg saw a short message. A base station on the top floor of the Twin Towers was destroyed for no reason this morning. The Investigation Bureau had sealed off the scene, and it was said that it was done by some kind of sharp weapon. Meg turned off the bracelet, very satisfied with the result. What made Meg a little uncomfortable was that the staff in the restaurant seemed to be paying a lot of attention to him, and this kind of attention had completely exceeded the kind of attention that a semi-finalist should have. There were even a few girls who looked at him with shining eyes.
"Can we share a table?" A gentle voice interrupted Meg's thoughts. Meg looked up and saw that it was Angelina with a tray.
He looked around the restaurant. The contestants' restaurant was separate from the Mocha Group's staff. As the competition entered the semi-finals, only the 4 of them were using this restaurant. Now, in addition to Iman and Patas, who were eating alone by the window, there were dozens of other tables in the restaurant.
"I'm not used to eating alone." Angelina seemed to have seen through Meg's doubts and showed a gentle smile.
"Not used to eating alone.
What about sleeping?" Meg nodded slightly and said, "Do as you wish."
"I'm Angelina."
Angelina put down the tray and sat down opposite Meg.
She smiled and said, "It's nice to meet you." Meg just nodded indifferently, then continued to eat his breakfast. He had a limited impression of Angelina. She was introduced in the contestants' information before. She was described as a cold goddess in the show. There were a lot of cold sycophants, so this was understandable. However, he was now a boy toy supported by a rich woman, so he couldn't casually flirt outside, especially in public. He still had the awareness that he was living off a woman. Moreover, he did not know what he was supposed to do in the later stages of the mission. Anyway, he could leave at any time. Interacting with others might lead them into the abyss. Meg's cold response didn't dampen Angelina's enthusiasm in the slightest. She didn't seem to be in a hurry to eat. She leaned forward slightly and stared at Meg with the same glint in her eyes as the 2 waitresses just now. She lowered her voice and said with some excitement, "Did you see the video yesterday? Justice has really arrived." Meg stopped what he was doing and looked at the excited and worshipful Angelina. He thought to himself, "How is this aloof? Even the auntie who just gave me an extra drumstick is more reserved than her." "I don't know what you're talking about." Meg's reply was still cold. At the same time, he was about to pick up the tray and leave. This breakfast was really disgusting. Angelina didn't seem to realize that Meg was deliberately alienating her. She said with some realization, "It seems that you haven't seen the video yesterday, right? Horace, the beast that you hung on your microblog, was judged by a person who called himself the judge yesterday. He was stabbed 363 times, once for each victim. It was you who made this matter attract everyone's attention. You have a huge contribution to this delayed justice. You are really a person with a strong sense of justice." Mag looked at the young girl who was so excited with light in her eyes. Did she meet an offline fan? But when did he become an idol? Favorability from Angelina. 92. Mag merely took a look at Angelina's favorability meter out of curiosity, and got a shock. This was far more favorable than the average couple. Generally, the peak of favorable impression between couples was when they were in the honeymoon period. At that time, even the other party's farting was considered a cute behavior. However, it was difficult for the favorable impression to exceed 95. As the heat of the honeymoon period passed and their lives returned to normal, some of their flaws would be exposed. When they realized that there was a gap between the other party and the perfect partner they had imagined, their favorability towards each other would decrease accordingly. After marriage, even breathing would be a mistake. Yesterday, they just competed on the same stage. They were pure passers-by who didn't even have any interaction with each other. Her sudden increase in favorability caught him a little off guard. "I just did what I should." Meg got up with the tray. "I'm done eating. Enjoy." This favorability rating made Mag a little scared. Was this the legendary fanatic groupie? When he was returning the plates, Mag deliberately glanced at the 2 big sisters who had been secretly watching him. Their favorability was 84 and 86 respectively,
which was far less scary than Angelina's. Strange. Meg left the restaurant with some doubts. It seemed that she was indeed a little too fanatical. He had to be careful. Angelina looked at Meg's back, blushing. She gently bit her lower lip. Mr. Hades is indeed a gentle and polite person. His extraordinary hearing allowed him to clearly hear this sentence as soon as he walked out of the restaurant. Mag. Sure enough, high favorability was enough to beautify everything. Why are these two guys suddenly so close? Is it a new script from the program? But didn't she refuse to be a couple with me before? She also said that she doesn't like to date on the program, even if it's fake. Iman bit into the biscuit with a puzzled expression. Meg had realized that yesterday's incident had greatly increased his favorability among passers-by, including men. People couldn't find the judge, so he, as the fuse, naturally took over this wave of popularity. I'm just rubbing myself. There's nothing wrong with that. After breakfast, Meg went to the contestants' lounge to wait for his makeup and some pre-match preparations. Although Meg, as a straight man, was a little disgusted by all kinds of things being applied to his face, this was a program after all. There was no need to make things difficult for the staff. Your skin is so good. You just need to add some makeup to suit the camera. The girl who did Meg's makeup blushed all the way, but she didn't forget to praise his good skin. Thank you. Meg responded with a smile. It was ridiculous to see her favorability increase from 80 to 88. After the makeup was done, the makeup artist put away her tools and couldn't help but ask carefully, "Can I take a picture with you?" Sure. Meg nodded. The makeup artist immediately raised her wristband and clicked on the selfie mode. She carefully approached Meg and quickly completed the selfie. Then she thanked Meg with a blushing face. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work. Meg nodded slightly. His wristband vibrated slightly. Meg raised his hand and glanced at it. It was a message from the program, explaining the rules of today's competition. You go ahead. The makeup artist happily took her things and left. Meg opened the message and was a little surprised. Chapter 2454. This time, the program team was going to do something new. The original rule that the contestants were free to choose the dishes provided by the program team had been changed. The program team would provide a fixed amount of funds and the contestants would have to go to the shopping mall on the first floor of the basement to buy their own ingredients. During this process, the program team would film the whole process and broadcast it live. The time spent buying ingredients would also be included in the total time, but it would still be 2 hours. This could be said to be a very interesting change. Meg could roughly guess that this was a test of the contestants' ability to choose ingredients. Of course, if the ingredients prepared by the program team were of the highest quality, he would pretend that he didn't say anything. Besides, this could also be a publicity stunt by the Mocha Group. After all, it was such an influential program where the top 4 contestants would buy ingredients live. This kind of publicity was beyond the imagination of ordinary advertisers. Why did the rules suddenly change? I actually have to buy ingredients myself. In the dressing room next door, Iman was shocked when he saw the new news. He looked a little nervous. Although he had been a chef for many years, he had always stayed in the kitchen of Tucker Hotel. They had professional suppliers, so there was no need for the chef to buy ingredients personally. Now that the program team had suddenly added this rule, it undoubtedly put a little pressure on him. Don't be nervous. I've already asked around. This is a method by the Mocha Group to attract customers to their shopping malls. The shopping malls will definitely have the best ingredients. You just have to find the ingredients you need as soon as possible. You can choose whatever you want, comforted his agent who was beside him. Understood. Iman nodded. That was right. He definitely couldn't ruin his reputation in the shopping mall. Angelina, who had just finished her makeup, also clicked on the news with a look of anticipation. Interesting. I didn't expect such a new rule. Shopping malls are only for the rich. This kind of shopping experience isn't common. At the same time, the live broadcast of the Chef King competition began. The scene started with the contestants finishing their makeup and receiving the news of the change in the rules. The camera cut to the venue. I didn't expect the rules to be changed. I was wondering why the contestants weren't present today. I didn't expect the producers to hide it from the judges so thoroughly, said Dave with a smile. This rule is a new breakthrough. Letting the contestants walk out of the restaurant and choose the ingredients themselves is a test of their ability to choose ingredients. This is a very important ability for a chef. Old Hunter nodded. This is the Mocha shopping mall. It provides the best ingredients and is also the special supplier of all the major catering groups. It's harder than winning the lottery if you want to choose unqualified ingredients from here. Another judge took over the conversation with a smile and started the first wave of advertisements. The judges opened the show with idle chatter to liven up the atmosphere of the show. However, an interesting phenomenon appeared in the live broadcast rooms of the Chef King tournament. Due to Horace's incident, the popularity of the Chef King tournament had reached a new height. The number of viewers in the official live stream room was actually lower than Hades's live stream room. The number of viewers was 500 million and 550 million respectively. I've switched on the dual screen mode. I'm watching Brother Hades's solo show while listening to the judges chatter. I've already turned off the main live stream. Listening to a bunch of greasy middle-aged men chatting is affecting my ability to see handsome guys. She cooks so well and has such a sense of justice. She's even so good-looking. I'm in love. Everyone else is surprised. Only my brother is calm. The bullet screen was flooded with comments. The number of viewers in the two live stream rooms was still increasing rapidly. A staff member entered the dressing room and informed Meg that the live stream had begun. He motioned for Meg to turn off his bracelet and followed the staff member to the shopping mall on the first floor. Meg cooperated and turned off his bracelet. He glanced at the camera in the corner of the dressing room. He wondered if any contestants were caught in the live stream. The 4 contestants gathered outside the elevator. Meg nodded politely and stood quietly. Iman and Padas greeted him with a smile as if they had known each other for a long time. When they met in the restaurant in the morning, they still looked like they didn't know him. Meg looked down and hid the smile in his eyes. He didn't intend to perform too much in front of the camera. However, the girl next to him didn't think so. She walked towards Meg and deliberately quickened her pace. She stopped in front of Meg and said with a blushing face, "Mr. Hades, the new rules must not be stressful for you." Meg didn't expect Angelina to take the initiative to talk to him in front of the camera. But since she asked, he couldn't avoid it. He could only smile politely and say, "Choosing ingredients is a chef's basic skill. It's indeed not stressful. My mother used to say the same thing to me." Angelina's eyes lit up. She looked at Meg with more and more admiration. She was a little embarrassed and said, "But I have trouble choosing. I think I'll be dazzled. I don't agree to this marriage. What's wrong with this girl? Why did her relationship suddenly increase? It's so awkward. Where's my aloof goddess Angelina? Why did she suddenly become a little fangirl? And a little muddle-headed? Ha ha ha, it's my first time watching this show. Am I the only one who thinks that these two are quite compatible? No. I'm not a fan of this couple. Brother Hades is mine." The bullet screen suddenly exploded. At the scene, Nancy also cast a questioning look at Johnny. Johnny spread his hands with a confused expression, indicating that he didn't know what was going on. In the early stages of the show, he did think of arranging a couple for Angelina, who was very good-looking and strong, to increase the popularity of the contestants. However, this proposal was rejected by Angelina because she didn't want to be a couple. The victim, Iman, was still on the stage. But now, Angelina suddenly took the initiative to approach Hades and did something that was inconsistent with her character. Hades's amazing operation yesterday had indeed brought great popularity to the show. But now, the whole internet regarded him as the incarnation of justice. Even the number of viewers in the personal live stream was higher than the main live stream. At this time, Angelina's actions might not bring about a couple's fans, but more doubts and criticism. However, discussion was popularity. Seeing the feedback from the technical staff, Johnny quickly dismissed the idea of reminding Angelina. "Wow, this woman is actually trying to get close to my man?" On the top floor of the Twin Towers, a collie sat up straight and looked at Angelina. Then she made an evaluation. Her butt isn't as perky as mine, her breasts aren't as big as mine, and she doesn't have as much money as me. She's not a threat. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel.
We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.